Of June 20th, 2013. I'm Joey Hargis, and I'll be presenting the cases for review in today's public hearing. The board would ask at this time if you'd either silence or put on vibrate your cell phone so they don't go off during the middle of the proceedings. We'd appreciate it. The procedure would be to introduce the case record as the Codes Department has it on the screen here by means of a PowerPoint presentation. We'll present any maps, photographs, plans, and letters that we've received for today's cases, as well as any correspondence from other Metro agencies. At the conclusion of our presentation, the applicant will come forward first, along with any persons in support of their case. After the applicants presented their testimony, the board will hear from those parties opposed to the cases today, and then after the opposition, the appellant can come back for a period of rebuttal. The board in their rules provides cases without opposition applicants 10 minutes to present your case. In cases with opposition, the board allows 15 minutes per side for your case. So if you have multiple speakers, please be sure to divide your 15 minutes accordingly. That's 15 minutes in total, not per person. All section numbers that I refer today come directly from the Metropolitan Code of Law, which is Title 17, covers the Metro Zoning Code, and was adopted by the Metro Council on January 1st, 1998, and applies to the entire jurisdiction of Metro government. I'll introduce and make a part of the record the entire zoning code, and will dispense from reading individual sections unless the applicant or opposition requests that I read those sections. The code requires that these proceedings be taped. Therefore, it's imperative anyone wishing to address this board to come forward. I have 4 seats at the table here for you. Turn your microphone on, identify yourself, and make your presentation. Once you get done speaking, if you would, please turn your microphone off. The board will go through all cases set for public hearing today, and then after each case, the board will discuss and vote on that case in front of you. The board's vested to act in the powers before us in Section 1740-180 of the Metro Code of Law. The code requires that 4 members of this 7-member board be present to constitute a quorum. The code also requires that you have 4 affirmative votes to grant your application. Today I have 6 members present, so you need 4 out of the 6 for approval, for your case to be approved. In the event you have a tied vote, let's say today the only tie we could possibly have would be a 3-3 vote, your case will stay on our agenda for the next 30 days. And then if after 30 days none of the members who participated change their votes, or the 7th member does not come in and review the record and watch today's hearing and become eligible, your case is deemed denied by operation of law. The applicant or any aggrieved property owner may request a rehearing of this board within 60 days of today's public hearing. Further, any aggrieved property owner or appellant may appeal this board's decision to Chancery or Circuit Court within the same 60-day period. Once that 60 days has elapsed, the board's decision is final and no further action can be taken. If you're an applicant and your case is granted, it is necessary for you to come and pick up the permit for which you've applied. The board is just a step in your permitting process, and you'll need to follow up with the Codes Department on obtaining the final approvals for your permit. It should be noted that if you fail to come get your permit within 2 years of today's hearing, the board's approval is now null and void, and you'll have to come back and seek reapproval at a later date. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases were filed in proper order. Applicants were notified by certified mail as required by the code. All affected property owners within 300 feet were notified by first-class mail, and a legal ad was published in the Tennessean. Before we call for elected officials, I do have one preliminary announcement regarding today's case, and it deals with case 2013-51 at the bottom of page 2. Mr. Ron Seffer, 2326 Knowlesville Pike, was requesting variances in street setback and a special exception for setbacks on Austin and Peachtree. That case is deferred by staff until August 1st. Mr. Seffer has not been out of the country and has not held his neighborhood meeting. And the board will not hear that case today. So if you're here for case 51, the case will not be heard today. It will be scheduled for August the 1st, the next available public hearing. And that's the only preliminary announcement I have today. The board does allow elected officials to address the board prior to today's hearing. Are there any elected officials present who wish to address the board? Hi, Council Lady. Come on forward. Any other side, Council Lady Al? All right, Council Lady, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I'm Berkeley Allen, council member for the 18th District. I appreciate the opportunity to speak early. I have another meeting that I have to get to. I'm sorry I can't stay to hear the whole proceedings. I'm here on case 213050, which is the 1708 and 1710 19th Avenue South. They are requesting two variances, one in the front setback and one in the sky plane. They have held two public meetings with the neighbors, and we've had lots of good discussion. I had sent you a letter before the last hearing, which I guess is still part of the record, and just want to reiterate my conditional support. I believe that we have worked with the neighbors to talk about most of their concerns. Obviously, everybody would like for everything to stay like it is, and that is probably not an option. So I think that we have addressed the issues of trying to maximize the green space as we can. They have actually reduced the amount of setback that they're asking for, hopefully in hopes of providing more green space and some additional tree planting. So I think that that I continue to offer my support for that. I had mentioned some issues about materials, again, because part of the discussion that we had was if we give them this setback, that will enable them to build a quality product, and I appreciate their desire to do that. I had stated that we would not accept any stucco. I will revise that to say EFIS. I can't remember what those initials stand for, but it is a lower quality. David, you could probably help me with that. Ask your David. I think high-quality stucco would be acceptable. The EFIS would not be, particularly at the lower level, so I will change that setback. Finally, there are some issues with this will be the front of the building facing 19th Avenue, and I know that the planning staff had some comments on making sure that how that front addressed the street, because there's some parking behind that, to make it so that that really is an attractive facade that is showing to the street, because clearly having the facade differentiated, looking quality, and looking like the front of a building is important. So with that, I would reiterate my conditional support and look forward to hearing what the rest of the hearing brings forth for y'all. Thank you for your time.
Councilor Allen. Yes, sir. Thank you again for your leadership on this project. I'm sure. How many people showed up at the last meeting? And
I can tell you.
And what was the real concerns of the people against it?
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I mean, just roughly.
16.
Okay.
About 16 people. It was 16 to 20 at the first one as well. I think just making sure that that as the building is brought closer to the street, that the massing of the building is not overpowering, that it's in keeping with the rest of the area. As you know, there's an urban design overlay just across the street that requires those buildings to be within 10 feet of the right-of-way. They've asked to bring this one within 8 feet of the right-of-way. So that seems consistent. I think building height is another issue that people want to be comfortable that this building will be of comparable height to what what the surrounding buildings currently are, so that it's not something largely different from what the others.
So you're also satisfied with parking entrance to the building
We had talked about, initially when they came, I think they thought they would be able to have two entrances on parking, one off of 19th and one off of the alley. It's my understanding that I think just the one off of 19th is currently in the plan. Belcourt, excuse me. I'm sorry, off of Belcourt. Mm-hmm. And that probably is the most appropriate street. That does involve those cars having to exit onto Belcourt and then onto 19th. So that's a small street with lots of cars parked on it already. It's probably a better option than dumping all those cars into the alley, which is even smaller.
And because of this new unit, in your opinion, do we need a new traffic light there? I know we already got one recently further down the road.
Which intersection would you be referring to?
We're talking about Wedgwood.
At 19th and Wedgwood? Yep. Mm-hmm. I have not seen traffic studies saying that that's a recommendation, and I can't claim to be a traffic engineer. My guess is if I lived there and I wanted to turn left, that is not where I would try to do it. I would go somewhere else in the village, right, and try to get out.
Well, thank you again for putting all this together.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just one quick, and I know you need to leave. I'm sorry, but the planning department had recommended disapproval because of the parking, the two-story parking, and I think that the concept was that this area becomes more urban and dense, you expect those setbacks to decrease, but you expect it to be more pedestrian friendly on the surface. And I just was wondering if, in part of their conversation, I think part of the report, and paraphrasing, as I remember reading it, was basically it says feels like it's a little premature. Before the final plan is, approved, they really wanted to have a better sense of just what that was going to look like terms of and since you all have had a couple of meetings with the developer, I just wanted to see if those are the issues that came up and if you were satisfied with some of the concerns that planning talks about in terms of pedestrian friendly face. Right, and I do respect those concerns. Right. I mean, so far what we have seen is a massing diagram just showing the blocking. Again, I mean, I understand the developer's need to know where he's going before he spends a lot of time doing his design. If there is not enough detail there to make folks comfortable, then we may need to move another step to get to a point where we're comfortable. That's a judgment call on that one, but I think it is important that the building address the street well, and we talked about that to some extent, if stairwells could alleviate that or ameliorate it or whatever. But I think that is important, and it does need to be something that we have assurances of as we move forward. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other elected officials present? Okay. If not, the board has a consent agenda prior to today's hearing. Board member reviews the record in the case, and if they feel that the applicant has met the criteria for the request that they've submitted, and they feel that testimony would not alter the material facts of the case, they recommended that case for approval to the board. I'll now call into the record the case is recommended for the consent agenda, and if you are here in opposition only, please, if you'll raise your hand, identify yourselves, and we'll hear that case in its regular order. The first case recommended for consent, case 2013-48, Metro Government Percy Warner Park, 1221 Forest Park Drive, requesting a variance in the paving requirements in R40 to construct a new 149-space parking lot, referred to the board under Section 1720-060G. Is there anyone in opposition to case 48? Mr. Chairman, seeing none, the variance is granted that based on the hardship that the gravel would allow for the natural area to be as undisturbed as much as possible, and would protect the overall integrity of those adjacent areas with that paving versus a full surface parking lot. With that is actually the only case recommended for consent today, case 48.
Okay, so we've got a motion. Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes.
If you're here for case 48, your case has been approved. You are free to go. Mr. Chairman and folks here, I do have the sequencing of the cases a little out of order on the agenda. The first case actually we will hear today will be case 50. This case was deferred by the zoning board, and under your rules we will hear that case first today at the last hearing. So if the applicants for case 50 will approach, we'll take case 50 first, and then we'll finish we'll get back on schedule with case 3 being the second case on today's agenda. Any parties present in, I know the applicant's here, any other parties in support for case 50? Any parties opposed to case 50 present? Okay, we do have folks present on both sides. So you'll have 15 minutes to present your testimony to both sides, and the folks with multiple speakers, if you guys will work out your times before you come forward. Let me pull up the slides and drawings from the prior appeal and display them for you. Okay, the subject properties are located at the northeast intersection of 19th Avenue South and Belcourt Avenue. It is in the RM40 zoning district. These are the two parcels that we show here, surrounded in red. an aerial photo of the subject property. I'm going to go through first the slides and photographs and site plan submitted at the prior hearing, and then resubmittal and get you guys up to speed. This was the site plan as originally submitted by the applicant here at this location, and you see the location of the building in its distance. They are permitted a 7-foot setback along Bell Court, utilizing the contextual street setbacks of the zoning code based upon the structure to the east, which you'll see my cursor moving upon there. This corner of the building of that corner 7 feet from the right-of-way. They are also allowed to match that setback on Bell Court under the base zoning and the zoning code setbacks. They were before you under a special exception along 19th Avenue South. The required setback there was a 30-foot setback, and they were requesting prior, I believe that showed 6 feet there in the original submittal. These are exhibits supplied to by the applicant at the prior hearing. The blue area would be an area that showed where they would meet the setbacks under the zoning code, and then the yellow area is their proposed location. Ground shots of the subject site and adjoining properties. This board asked the applicants to complete a massing diagram showing, the approximate shape, size of the building, where it would be located on the property. These are the next slides that I'll show you are those he submitted to you all. To orient you, north would be at the bottom of the page. This is Wedgwood, 19th Avenue here, and then Bell Court on the south, the large tower across the street there. This is the massing looking from the north toward the south, and then a view from the south facing north oriented at the top, Wedgwood Avenue, 19th, Bell Court, and then this is facing east over here. The applicant's revised site plan, which is a lot clearer than my scan from the first one, hopefully you guys can read that a little better, proposing an 8-foot setback moving back off of 19th from the 6 they had originally requested. 8 would be at the northwestern corner of the building, and then spreading out to 11 foot and a third at the intersection of Bell Court and 19th. Again, the 7-foot contextual setback still applies. A 20-foot rear setback still applies. In the zoning code, this is, for purposes of determining rear setback, this is the front on 19th. So the alley has to be the rear setback. And then they're complying with the 5-foot setback on the north property line. And I've got some additional photographs. I'll have to pull those up here in just a moment. Then I'm going to turn it over to the applicants at this time while I bring additional documents up for you all. If you would, please identify yourselves and make your presentation. Again, for all parties here, the clock to the right of where you'll be seated is your time remaining. It will run upon your testimony. It will stop for any questions and answers. Your responses to the board, if as you're responding you start getting back into testimony, we're going to start that clock back up. So just be mindful of that time to your right. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen, if you'll identify yourselves and make your presentation.
My name is Jay Fulmer. I'm with Barge Wagner.
And I'm Todd Jakovich with Stonehenge, the developer.
Thank you for seeing us again. Since the last meeting, we understand that we didn't have enough material to clearly convey what we were asking. We've since gone back and met with the neighbors more and gotten more feedback. We did generate the massing diagrams that we can go back to. We leaned on the architect a little bit more to get a little further, and that's how we're able to reduce our request. Our first parameters were a little bit more conservative than we need. We're still asking, the massing diagram indicates that the step back would be at 46.5 feet, which is why we reduced it to 2 additional feet to cap it at 47 for the sky plane. Original request was 5 feet. And as you can see, the building has been pushed back to 8-foot setback. And to make it a little clearer, Joey, do you have the slide that shows the parking?
Yes.
What also might not have been clear last time is the expanded footprint. The overall intent is to reduce the overall height of the building. And so if you go back and focus, we've got two of the plates shown of the drive aisles that are produced in each case. And so on the top one, you can see that on the right side of the plate, you've got perpendicular parking on each side. But on the lower one is you only have parallel parking as you pull in. And that's why it requires twice as many plates to satisfy the 54 parking spaces that we're proposing. So hopefully that provides a little bit more information, easier to read. And Todd, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, again, to reiterate, we appreciate you guys' feedback last time, and obviously the massing plan, if you can go to the next massing. The massing plan obviously helps to show what we were discussing last time. Again, we apologize. We look at parking decks all the time and assume this was relatively easy to understand, so we understand that this helps. And one of the things that we did want to point out, and it's hard to see on a massing diagram, but we do have a 9-foot fall from the alley to the front. And so as we've talked about with planning department, we've talked to the planning department, some of their concerns are to get rid of the parking on the first floor. The problem is the back of the parking lot is actually subgrade. So in the back corner, we're actually digging 20 feet deep. So with that 9-foot drop, we really have 9 feet showing on this frontage, which again is a topo. If we sunk the garage further, that would put our units in the back actually underground. And that, doesn't seem to make any sense as far as water infiltration and all that. And so that's really one of the comments that we had back to them as we were talking. And again, I think they focused more on what's the facade going to look like. And as the councilwoman addressed, we're absolutely working with them, and we agree to the products that they've recommended in her conditional approval. And again, as we've done in other products, we obviously agree that the facades and the appearance of the property are critical. One of the things that we did want to point out as well is, again, talking to the neighbors. We've had a few that were here last time that were opposed to it being up front. We've had a few send in letters to you, to Joey, that I believe you guys have seen, that now that we've moved it back a couple of feet and that they can see instead of 6 feet, it's actually an 8 foot to about 11.3, so on average it's somewhere in the 9 to 10 foot, which again is in concurrence with what's going to happen across the street eventually when it's developed. So we're within that 10-foot kind of range, and again wanted to push it back. Some of that again was us pushing on the architect, saying how many feet can we get, because we know some of the people would like us to be even further off that. But again, as Joey pointed out, one of our issues is we have a 20-foot setback in the back, and so we have to stick to the 20, we have to stick to the 5, so our building footprint on those two sides is pretty much stuck. And then on the front, we've pushed the parking deck down as small as possible, and one of the things we've done to accommodate that is created compact spaces, which allowed us to get a couple more feet, and that just helped us with the design. But again, our biggest thing is really that when you go back to the page up above, Joey, is one of the things, as we said before and we continue to say, is we're not parking based on code. We don't want to park based on code, because that would only require 27 parking spaces, and that would force other people to be out in the streets, and we don't want to do that either. And so we actually are over parking it, and what we're doing is parking it 1 per bedroom, which is again above the required, which produces 54 parking spaces. And to do 54 parking spaces, our goal is to have 1 subgrade and 1 above grade, and that accommodates the 54. Again, keeps the building at a relatively shorter height, obviously, but just adding the 2 floor plates, and then obviously the building footprint gets smaller as well. So our goal, again, is to keep the building as shallow as possible, but also, again, work with the commission and the council and the neighbors as we've talked to them about. Yeah, we absolutely agree that the facade should be set.
I've got a question, and I'm not sure. I'm confused, and so I hope my question doesn't come across as confused. But when I looked at what you all submitted last time and started to understand it a little more clearly, and then look at what you submitted this time, I still don't have a really good sense of exactly what you are planning to do, because what you submitted for this hearing, I have option A, which is 120 by 120 footprint for 54 spaces, and there are drawings that show that, and I understand that. The drawing that Joey put up isn't a square drawing, that doesn't appear to be square, so that doesn't, to me, doesn't appear to be 120 by 120. And I can't do the math in my head. I'm just looking, what I see is a rectangle, not a square. And so that's not 120 by 120. And then you have option B, which is 100 by 110, which is another option. And I guess where I was having a little bit of trouble last time and where I'm still having a little bit of trouble this time, and I hope you can help clarify, is for me to, and I don't really have a problem in concept with the request, but the conditional support that the council lady has given was conditioned on a lot of things that are unknown, and if this goes through, then they may be unknown till they go up on the building, because there's no other process you'd have to go through. But for me, for the special exception, I think special exception is based on a specific project and a specific proposal, and I don't know what you're doing, because I'm looking at 120 by 120, I'm looking at 100 by 120. I see a building mass that looks square, I see a flat diagram that looks rectangular. So when I was hoping for a little more clarity of you guys saying, this is what I want to do. And it sounds like your options are still being discussed among yourselves. I mean, that's still an ongoing internal discussion.
The 120 by 120 is a mislabel. The site plan that we have drawn shows 123 by 120. If we can scale it, I've got a 2-scale drawing that we can verify that. It was a discrepancy, and the way the 123 allows for more facing on the sides, because you got 60 feet for each set of parking, the 18, 24, 18 multiplied by 2, and then you have the extra couple feet for the face of the parking.
So I guess why was the 100 by 120 in our package?
That's what we could build within our parameters without the special exception. And so that's what drives it to the smaller parking orientation with the parallel parking versus the 90-degree parking. And that requires us to put 3 parking plates above grade versus just the 1. And both of them, we'd go below grade 1, because at the back, at the northeast corner, we're down 20 feet below grade at the alley. Does that make more sense, or?
Yeah, I think it wasn't. It could have been labeled a little bit better to say, hey, option B is if we don't get the setback, this is what we're going to do, and it wasn't. So that was why it was confusing. To me, if you present me option A and option B, you're saying to help me decide what to do, or this may be what we're thinking about, or whatever. So I didn't know what option A and option B meant, but I do now. So that makes sense.
Right.
So you want to do a 120 by 120 or 123 by 120.
Correct. That's correct. And if you look on this is a slide with the parking lot, you can see we've actually laid out units on it, and so we get 5 units per floor. And again, we've laid out boxes of units, but we've got 5 units per floor. Again, with the smaller footprint, we showed it more for height and scale, saying, hey, we don't want to go this tall, we like to keep it lower. We only get 4 floors. And so we not only have to add an extra floor of residential, but also 2 floors of parking. And so it's really just to show the rationale behind our decision.
And then what you had sent last time had a 120 by 120, but it was asking for a 6-foot variance, and now you're asking for 8. So I guess where did the 2 feet?
The site plan was,
everything's still 120. Where's the 2 feet?
Right. The site plan was 125 by 120.
Okay.
And there was miscommunication in the beginning. And
so it should have been 125 last time, and now it's 123.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Right.
And I guess the only other thing I'd like for you to address fairly explicitly, if you can, is the planning department's concerns, because I don't have my packet from last time, but I do remember them being supportive in concept of what you were doing, and we talked about that, and I said that as the neighborhood gets more urban, and it makes sense for a more pedestrian developments closer to the street, but once you did the massing, they came out against it, and I'd like for you to address how you get them back on board when they were earlier.
Well, they want an activated first floor, and so there's no presence of parking. We can't go further down with the parking. We have to come up with a more creative way to screen the parking, and based on what they've seen, they changed their decision to approve with conditions to just disapprove. That's the main condition that's changed, and so they're not comfortable. Basically, they haven't seen anything that gives them a vote of confidence. You're going to come up with a way. I know that there's no way to lock us into that with a condition right now. That is a major concern of the neighbors. It's something that we're going to focus on. But at this point, we can't get into that design until we know our footprint, and we haven't really dove into that just yet.
And when we talk to the planning department, again, and I think it's one of the top of the second page, it says that they do support the setback. And the real answer is they just haven't seen the facade, and we were literally given a day and a half to send them some images and said, hey, here are some thoughts we have, and they didn't like them, and we didn't get response. And we've actually met with them and said, can you help us? What do you want? What would you like? Some of the situation there is what they want and what the neighbors want are two different things. And so again, we're working with the council members and the neighbors and saying, okay, there's setbacks, and then there's, wait a minute, there's setbacks. And again, one of the people that we've worked with as a neighbor who has come on our side is they're great with us going to the setback, but don't go over it. And the planning department wants more of a grand out front and really wants it up to the sidewalk. And we're going, wait a minute, we pulled it back because everybody wants it pulled back. And so there's really some give and take there that I think they want stuff, and they're really driven by facade. Again, what is the facade going to look like? Again, I think their comment said we should remove 27 parking spaces, which again, we don't believe is good for us. We definitely don't believe it's good for the neighborhood. And so even by reducing it, we can't really drop the building, because again, as we talked about the 9-foot drop, then we're putting units underground. And so again, we got these comments about the time you guys got them, and so we've been talking to them. We actually met with them, and they said, yeah, just keep bringing us ideas. Okay.
And you had said at the last hearing that the comparable development would be the apartment building on Music Row 16th. Was it the note?
Yeah, as far as height, exactly.
I could remember that.
Note 16
and basic look and feel, construction quality.
And that we somewhat misspoke on that. A lot of it was quality. It wasn't necessarily like Note 16 has awnings that fit the character of Music Row that don't fit Hillsborough Village. And we came up with that in our last meeting. That was a big concern. The focus was more on height, mass, and quality of finish.
Okay.
It wasn't necessarily the sort of new age overhangs and eaves, and so there's a better example that it's under construction right now is apartments on Franklin Pike, but it's more of a brick,
Yeah, matching with the neighboring property with the red brick, right. and bringing it again a little more of the historical feel. We're more in the age versus more of the urban kind of edgy look that we've done over Music Row. And so again, as far as quality, we've got granite countertops and those things in the unit. So we were talking about construction quality. Right. Again, the facade for us. Again, early on was, we'd do some storefront on the front and do some of the stuff to shield the parking. And again, those are things that we're massaging with the planning department and the neighbors and saying, okay, what do you guys prefer? And if it's preferred to not look storefront and not look retail, we can put brick down there and cover the parking lot and you won't see it. And
then amenity on your plan, is that's just kind of a retail or restaurant?
No, that's really, it's our leasing office, and, turns into a club area later. Again, we'll have an amenity up on the podium as well with the courtyard, and probably an amenity inside the building as well. So that's really
clubhouse
that was really, again, part of where we thought the storefront would do the facade. That's what that amenity area was for.
So if you're sitting on the intersection of Belcourt and 19th where that amenity area is, you've got the full exposed first floor. Well, the amenity area takes up a third of the facade, and then the grade starts climbing. So at the northwest corner, you're exposed 6 feet. So the first floor is actually submerged, and that's about as much of actual activated side as you can provide before the grade takes over and eliminates the possibility.
I guess the only other question about the facade and the planning department and the council that he's, and thus I think neighborhood as conditional support is, what would you propose what conditions, and I know it's for us to discuss, but I'd like your opinion on what conditions you would place on how you would design the facade in order to reasonably appease the council lady and planning department. I mean,
I think that we're limited to, obviously the parking deck has to be vented. We would have to screen that completely with landscaping of some sort so you could not see any sort of vent. It almost looked like exposed brick or stucco, whatever happens to be at that level, if you can see that portion from the street. If you can't see the amenity area, then you need to see a building wall and no opening. You could end up trying to do some sort of fake window, like a dummy window with blinds drawn or something, but obviously there wouldn't be anything behind it. And those are, I don't know if that's the activated facade that planning wants. Well,
I think also, and again, to speak on Stonehenge's behalf, this is our fourth development. Obviously, we've met with all the departments and different people, and we adapt based on the neighborhood, we adapt based on the neighbors, and so at this point, what we feel the best way to do it is call it materials and say we agree to the materials, and then we'll go through, and as we start designing it, and again, as we talk to some of the neighbors where they don't want it sticking out, we've already somewhat said, okay, we're in agreement that we won't go over the setback, which a lot of times some of the urban stuff, we stick patios out. So in other words, we'll bury the patios inside the building or come back inside the building. And so, those are a lot of the conversations, and those are the things that, again, for us, it's as the facade kind of comes and goes, or comes in and comes out, those are the things that we'll deal with colors and materials as well, again, to fit into the neighborhood is really what we look at.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay, then I think you've got 9:48 for a rebuttal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The opposition, it's your opportunity.
Just if we get four to come up, if folks want to rotate in as those folks leave.
And remember, you have 15 minutes in the aggregate, less time where we're questioning, so if you could allot that between yourselves.
I'll begin. My name's Ross Suber. I'm the president of American Style Renovations, and I also happen to be the president of the HOA board for Arlington Court. And we had a couple members, owners that couldn't be here, and they sent statements. I'd like to read one of them. She'll read the other, and then we'll go with who's here if that's okay. This happens to be from Dr. Mark and Rhonda Freeman. Zoning board members, we own 3 condos at Arlington Court. We are opposed to the request for a zoning change for the property at 19th and Bell Court. The additional loss of green space and light from what will already be a large building will have a negative impact on the residents surrounding this proposed building. I am not at all opposed to new development next door. However, the current zoning would allow for a building that is consistent with the surrounding environment. Our units along the alley have the majority of their windows facing the alley. Any increase in current zoning will increase a shadow effect on those units. The community plan that was created for this area allows for reasonable changes with the appropriate impact on the environment for all. There is no reason to change that here. We are not a downtown neighborhood, but a wonderful village that needs to remain so. Thank you, Dr. Mark and Rhonda Freeman.
Hi, thanks for listening to us. We are the homeowners of Arlington Court condos, and when you look at those photographs, you see this large structure, and we're that little structure that's beside it. If you can give us maybe that one photograph. Sorry, I don't know which one.
That one.
Yeah, we are the photograph. We are the diagram to the left. We're 2 stories tall. But this is from Sarah Williams. She's also on the board and was not able to be present, so I'm going to read hers first, please. Board members, please accept my sincere apology for not attending this second hearing. I had an out-of-town engagement I could not change. I appreciate you deferring the decision until Barge, Wagner, Sumner, and Cannon could get together their drawings. I'm still uncomfortable with the proposed plan to modify the current zoning for 1710 and 1708 19th Ave South. I believe that there are no benefits, only drawbacks, to widening the building and making it taller. The building is already going to take up more square footage at the base than the existing two homes on the two lots. It will add 18 homeowners where there were once 2. If they are anticipating 54 cars to house in the parking lot, that is 54 more cars traveling our small and narrow block. The current skyplane limit, without the special exception, is already at 45 feet to the setback, which will block the sun and view from our building. I hate to see 22 extra feet of building and living space instead of trees and landscaping and grass to make our living area desirable and comparable to surrounding neighborhoods. I'm informed that they added 2 feet to their proposed setback and have seen the drawing where it is on a diagonal, 8 foot at the north and 11.3 feet at the south. I understand that this isn't a perfectly square lot. A proposed compromise is to have 30 feet of setback at the southern end of the property corner at Belcourt and 19th and have 26.7 feet of setback at the northern end. This seems like a true special exception to me, since the lot isn't square. Upholding the 30-foot setback on the largest end and therefore losing 3.3 feet on the smaller end would not impact the neighbors negatively and is an excellent solution to this problem. I don't think increased profit factor is a good reason to change the existing rules, and we are all saying we are fine with them building exactly what they can build in that lot. So I don't know why this is up for discussion other than the lot being not perfectly square. I am in support of development in general and feel that the zoning rules the developers are confined to are not limiting at all. I do not feel by widening the building at the base we will be exempt from the height factor, because it will already be taller than our building without widening it. Widening essentially creates a bigger building all the way around. I review the financial reports on the board at Arlington Court. Landscaping is a part of our operating expenses that we do not take lightly. We work hard to keep Hillsborough Village walkable as well as beautiful. We love our green space and are committed to being a greener neighborhood because of it. Please do not reduce their setback, as it will result in 22 more feet of building and 22 less feet of existing lawn and trees. Sincerely, Sarah Williams.
For the record, would you state your name?
My name is, turn myself off. My name is Teresa Suber, and I'm a homeowner at Arlington Court.
Thank you.
My name is Marty Hansen, Hansen. I'm also an owner at Arlington Court. I'm the one who brought up the question of a traffic study on this. There had not been one. Apparently, I am the traffic study. I went there prior to the last meeting and counted 73 cars during a half hour from roughly 10:30 to 11 o'clock in the morning, weekday morning. Went back last night from 5 to 5:30 and this morning from 8:30 to 9. The good news is there's no speeding. Everybody has to slow down because the street is very narrow. Okay. The bad news is that 1 out of 5 people maybe stop at the arterial stop sign. Okay. Other than that, it's a slide and turn situation with it. Last time a question was raised when we had already spoken about whether we felt there's a need for a stoplight on Wedgwood. The answer is no, emphatically. However, you might take a look at an arterial stop sign on the other corner where everybody's coming, as you would face it if you were sitting in that same little place I was. They're coming up from the village, up from the Pancake Pantry, and they want to turn left to get over to turn onto Wedgwood Boulevard. So the pattern is to look at the photo there. They're coming up from the upper right-hand corner of the photo to the top corner of the building, turning along the building, coming to Wedgwood, and then going across the bottom middle. That's where basically 1 car every minute, a little more than 1 car every minute, is going to be. So that, for example, when I look at this drawing up here this morning, and this is my first view. I missed the community meeting. I was out of town. There were 4 cars at one point. waiting to turn right onto Wedgwood at the little bit of 19th Avenue we see there, which would of necessity be blocking the entry at that particular point, et cetera. Anyway, it boils down to, I was surprised, for all three time periods, and two of them are basically commute hours, it was about the same. A little more than 2 cars a minute, mostly from the direction of up from the village, turning to go out that way, or coming in and going down into the village. So I don't think there's a problem with commute hours so much as understanding that it's a very narrow street. Now, I look at the plan and I'm baffled. The question I raised last time was...
He's got some time.
I'm sorry, did I?
No, just keep in mind the time for this gentleman.
My question last time that the appellant dismissed was, where does the moving van pull up to load and unload? Okay? Because if there's a moving van on either one of those streets, 19th or Belcourt, nobody else can drive by it because there are cars parked on both sides, right? It is too wide. Maybe a motor scooter or a bicycle could, but not that. Now, if the idea is something is going to drive on that alley, even the post office little vans don't drive on that alley. UPS wouldn't begin to think about driving on that alley. Okay, so where is the moving van going to unload and load all the people who are moving? The appellant at the last meeting said, oh, well, they're small apartments, they won't use big moving vans. I'm sorry, that denies reality. I moved one large room from Manhattan to the hills of Los Angeles, and a big moving van came to get it, and a big moving van came to deliver it. And what they do is they have some kind of a clearinghouse situation. I've got half a load going to Kansas City, who's got someone to go farther, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, for me, that was 2 different vans. It was not the same van that moved them. So when you see vans unloading from the side and from the back, it's because they're sharing 3 or 4 drop-off points. So big moving vans do show up. Okay, where does it go in this diagram? Please help me know that. I don't see it at all.
We should let
I'm sorry, go ahead, let him speak.
My name is Dane Bryant. I, along with my brother, own 2 of the properties across the street on 19th Avenue. That's 1709 and 1711. I did meet with the developers. One of my complaints was when they had the 6-foot setback. I mean, that just startled me. But I did, oh, give me some room, please, because I see the other tenants at the condominiums, Arlington Place, I see them pushing everything this way. I think, whoa, if I could just get a little bit of room. And so I agreed not to be opposed to an 8-foot setback, provided it went down to 11 1/3, and that no stoops or balconies or anything else encroached on that step back as we went up. That doesn't say that I agree with the sky plane being any more than 45 feet, because I would like to see that, or that any of the other questions and ideas that my neighbors at Arlington Court have, I want to back up and support. But that's about what I wanted to say.
Could I
Though I would really wish it would stay just like it is, and I wish we'd go back to the original setback.
I want to be able to say something.
So let me stay there. I'm through.
I've actually, again, my name is Teresa Suber, and I actually read Sarah's words, but I wanted to say a few of my own. I'm not opposed to a setback, but I want the same footprint. I would like to see 18 units. I don't want to see a larger building. I want what codes has set in the code. I want, like Mr. Taylor, as you said, it's very difficult to even fathom what this is going to really look like when you see this massing diagram. It's just very difficult for us to understand what it's going to look like, but it's going to be big. And the larger the footprint, the more units. We get that. The more cars. And as far as 54 parking spaces, I'm a little confused, because it's my understanding 1 bedroom requires 1 parking space, but 2 bedrooms requires 1.5 parking spaces for code. So they really don't need to provide 54 parking spots. But potentially you could have that many more cars and visitors, and on it goes. His moving van analogy is a good one. The other thing I want to add is our unit in particular is in the alley. So the alley is the front for us. So right now I look out at green space. I'm going to look at the side of a building. I get that, no matter how large it is. I would just like it to be smaller. So that's really my 2 cents, and I'd like to see more of a building diagram, but I understand the cost for the developer before he knows what he's allowed to build. So.
Once again, my name's Ross Suber. I'm Teresa's husband, and our unit is on the corner facing the alley. We have 6 windows on the alley. It's where the majority of our light comes from. I am probably the only one that's actually for it. Everybody else on the board and the majority of the other members are against it, because for the increase, because I realize we live by the same sword, we die by the same sword that we live by. One day, we might be looking at the same situation for our property, and we might be constrained by the decision we make. We are concerned with parking because it's difficult to park there now. And it makes sense to me that even with parking spaces available, residents in those condos would be able to apply for a street parking permit like we do. And if that's the case, they can park right in front of our building, and then we have no place to park because we only have 16 parking spaces in our parking lot and depend on the parking on 18th and Bell Court to provide the rest of our parking. We're also concerned with material. The deal seems to be a modern version of what Craftsman would look like, and that's great and nice. But we're concerned with the material on the alley because it is our front. It is our access to our parking lot, whereas their access will be on Bell Court. So if they had a lesser material on that facade, it wouldn't make much sense for them either. We're mainly concerned with parking and material as far as I'm concerned, but you heard their complaints. That's it.
And density also, because there's a lot of traffic in that area. There are a lot of people moving around in that area, and it's already very dense. So
can we get to the view of the alley again, please?
Okay. I want to add that it is a village. It's not the Gulch. It's a village. It's Hillsborough Village. It's historic. Even though we're not in a historic district, our building was built in 1920s. It is historic. It's beautiful, and we understand progress, but it's a village. We want to remember that. There's an art crawl. There's all kinds of things.
Along the alley, I'm not sure what the setback request is to the alley pavement, but right now
it's 20 feet.
To our building, it's 6 feet off the pavement. Let's assume it's 6 feet to their side.
No, it's 20. It's 20. The code says it's 20.
It's 20.
They can't change that.
Okay. Well, what I want to point out is there are 3 power poles on their side of the alley right now. I don't see any power poles out here. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have some questions.
Oh,
can you say?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We have questions.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
I guess that the thing I'm looking at on these plans, the 20 feet setback in the rear it meets codes, and that's what they can do, and that's it might not be desirable for neighbors, but it's there's nothing that there's no remedy on that. That's the code. And when I was talking with the developers a minute ago about the 2 different options and trying to get my sense of clarity on what they were presenting, it sounds like that the 2 options are they fully comply with the code now, and they will have a much taller building, in fact 2 more floors of parking facing the alley, or they will have a much shorter building and only 2 floors of parking facing the alley, and that's if they get the wider footprint that they're asking for with the front variance. And so those seem to be your choices, and I'm getting a little bit of conflicting from the letters and some of the things that you were saying, and I fully appreciate the situation you're in, but it seems like those are the evils, so to speak, that you have to choose from. 2 floors of parking that face your alley, or 4, and I didn't get a good sense of clarity about a preference there. 0 or 2, I'm sorry.
Why would they need so much more parking if it's a smaller building?
Well, they have a right
less
to put,
units.
I mean, they have a right to put 18 units there, and the units can be up to 3 bedrooms, so they have a right to put 18 3-bedroom units on their property, and that's something that we have, that's not even for discussion for us, because that's what the codes say they can do.
Right. We understand that they can do, we understand that they can actually have 18 units and up to 3-bedroom units. But at 45 feet, they've got to stair step it in like a pyramid on all sides. So how large can they really realistically go with the top unit? I don't know, because I'm not an architect. I don't know what the math would be, but just logic tells me 18 units is going to be just so big, and it's going to be just so tall. And frankly, there's not a lot of difference, because we're only 2 stories between a 4-story building and a 6-story building. If it's smaller, and so the downside being taller is a little bit better for us than being larger on the, if that answers the question.
Yeah, it does.
Joy, there's no sky plane on the alley, just a height requirement?
Correct. You've got, let me get my book in front of me. Yeah, the sky plane is just enforced upon the public streets. 3 sides.
I'm sorry, then I'm misunderstood.
No, it is. No, David, the sky plane does come in off the alley for multifamily. On full commercial buildings, there's none from an alleyway or adjoining property. But for multifamily, there is.
And is it the same as the streets?
It is. The same sky plane.
Tell us about this on-street parking by permit, which is growing in the city of Nashville. So right now, you can apply and get a special permit, and only you can apply. Only you can park there. Your concerns were people in this building will be able to take advantage of that same program?
Yes, we have, as you can see in the parking lot, if you count them, I believe it's 16 spaces. We have 24 units. Mm-hmm. Well, that's clearly not enough for the building. Mm-hmm. So parking lot's kind of first come, first serve. If you live on that side, we don't care. We don't park there. But we depend on, because of Belmont students, Vanderbilt students, you know how crazy it is. I believe you're in that area.
Yes.
It's crazy. They would park on our grass if we let them. So I would assume those same residents would be able to apply for street parking permits. I don't know, maybe they wouldn't, but I'm worried about that, because we park on the street by that $10 permit, and it's your yearly renewal.
That's it, $10.
And it's only on our side of our side of Belcourt and on our side of 18th. But the other side of the street is open.
It's also parking. The parking permit only allows you to park there during the day. At night, you've got Sunset Grill and Cabana. Everybody's squatting on those spots. So this is starting to become like New York City, where
the valet parkers even bring cars down to that area.
So.
And along 19th, I know for certain, is permit parking right now.
So
we're going from 2 homes, like as Sarah mentioned, to 18.
I get that point, but I want to ask one more time, just to make clear that we've talked about 5 stories versus 7. It seems like you all would rather 7 in a smaller footprint, though.
I would rather have a smaller footprint, because I think it's going to restrict, the 18 units is going to restrict how high it goes anyway. How tall can they go? And I know that it costs a lot more money to stair step it in than to go straight up anyway.
Because you realize if we don't approve this plan, there's an alternative that they can do without coming to this board, which just means going higher up.
We've all discussed it, and again, if it's a smaller footprint and taller, I think it's just more beneficial than it being wider. And if they were to go wider, couldn't they go taller still? There's no restriction then either. They would just have a larger base.
They would have to build, if we approve it a certain way, they'd have to build it that way.
The problem is we don't even know what that way is. because we just see that. So
You mean when we get to the point where we do know what that way is?
I mean, the height of the building, if we approve this today, it would be for what they have submitted, that many stories.
I want to point out, too, I think I heard reference to, maybe from the letters that you read, calling this a zoning change. It is not a zoning change. It's
variance, is that what it is?
It's a special exception rules that we have to go by, so we're not empowered to make zoning changes here.
So, Mr. King, that means this would just be specific to this building. It wouldn't really mean that we could build something on our land that's bigger, so you see?
And you are aware they have requested a zoning change for which there'll be another hearing, correct?
Yeah, there is another meeting there's another meeting later on for a zoning change.
From who?
I think combines the sky plan and height of the building.
No, that's this year. They will be combining the lots.
It's my understanding there's another meeting, and it's, we're homeowners. We're not well versed in all this. Although I'm a contractor's wife, I don't know. That's hard for me to conceptualize. Now, they built a beautiful building. Note 16 is very pretty. I'd prefer seeing something like, I don't like the back facade. What I'm going to look at, I don't like it. And there's 3 units that will look at that. 4 units that look at that, sorry. I do love the construction on Wedgwood at the interstate, those old, beautiful look, do you know?
Yeah, at the end, at Wedgwood and I-65 on the, what would it be?
Right
the
at the
northwest corner right there?
At the Wedgwood exit of 65.
It's offset.
Townhouse looking.
Yeah, they're classic looking. They look.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see something like that, as opposed to Note 16. Note 16 fits great on 16th Ave, but it's not a neighborhood, it's not a village. It's Music Row, and it's really changed quite a lot since I moved here 24 years ago. But needless to say, so that I'm clear, what you said, Mr. King, is this would just be an exception today for this particular building, not a rezoning, so it doesn't affect ours. Okay.
The request I have in front of me is to change it from neighborhood general with a special policy to urban neighborhood evolving policy. So that's the next meeting we have to go to.
I'm not familiar with that, but that's no bearing on today's action.
But this is one step closer to that.
Would you all want to hear maybe Joyce tell them exactly what we have to find for a special exception to grant the request that this appellant is making here?
Mr. King, the board is charged under 1712-035 and 1712-060 as it relates to sky plane. 035 states that the board, get to the right page here, the applicant shall provide evidence to the board in section 1712-060 that the proposed building setback shall not create an adverse impact on adjacent properties nor detract from a strong pedestrian-friendly environment. So that's the basis of which the board is to review this plan in regards to setbacks. And in regards to the height, it says the applicant shall provide evidence to the board that the proposed building height shall not create an adverse impact on air, light, shadow, or wind velocity patterns due to the configuration of the building relative to the maximum permitted height standards and its juxtaposition to and with existing structures in the vicinity or approved but not yet built structures. In addition, the applicant shall demonstrate that the proposed building height contributes to and does not detract from a strong pedestrian-friendly streetscape.
Yes, I've got that. That's F3, and I think that we will have a huge impact on air, light, shadow, all those things, wind velocity. Whether it's, our building's only 2 stories tall. If their building's going to be 4 stories or 10 stories, it's irrelevant. It's going to stop our wind flow anyway. So.
Yeah, but I think all we're talking about is the 2 feet that they're asking. The height that they can build to it absolutely will impact those things because there's nothing there now. But what we have to think about is the extra 2 feet that they're asking
Will
for.
the difference actually
Will that extra
any
2
difference?
feet have a dramatic impact on those issues, not with the 45 feet, because the 45 feet they can do without us having to ask those questions.
So the 2 feet, the reason they would want that is because at 45 they would have to stair step in, right? Is that the reason they want that? Additional 2 feet? At 45 feet they would have to?
They're shaking their heads, yes.
I mean, I'm okay with 47 feet. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I don't want bigger, so.
They can address that on their rebuttal when they come up, so.
Do we have any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Then we'll allow rebuttal for 948.
Thank you.
And as the applicants come forward, and for future applicants that are going to address this board later in the hearing, rebuttal period is only for issues raised by the opposition. You cannot introduce anything new into the record. So if you'll address the comments raised by opposition. With that, we'll turn it over to you guys. Before I begin, members, got a little lost and found situation. The security folks, there was a button left when folks checked in. If this belongs to anyone here, please let me know and come on by here and I'll give it to you. Thanks. If no one claims it, I'm keeping it. So
some of the issues that were raised were traffic, vis-a-vis a traffic study. Are you applying for a zoning change? What about the moving van? And is there anything else?
Parking on the street.
Right. Okay.
Traffic study at this point, 54 cars is typically not enough of an increase to trigger a traffic study. It's being a multifamily use. It's not typically a big increase of traffic throughout the day. It's more of an 8 to coming and going to and from work, where there will be a little bit of additional traffic. But I understand the concern, but typically 54 cars is not enough to have a significant impact. The question on the zoning change, after our BZA submittal last time, investors called and asked, is it possible to do condos versus apartments? An application was made to try to keep the same number of bedrooms and same footprint that we're trying to establish today, but basically chop it up into 1 and 2 bedroom versus 3. We don't know if that's the final result, and right now we're still pursuing the 18-bedroom apartments. Whether that comes to fruition or not is unknown, but we right now need to focus on getting our building established so we can get into the design and see the project move forward.
So are you applying for a zoning change or not?
We submitted for the intent of changing it from 3-bedroom to 1 and 2 bedroom, but the same number of people, same building footprint, same height, same everything. It's just a density issue, and it's just chopping it up differently.
We've submitted for an SP, is what we've submitted for, not a full zoning change.
So you want to have 54 bedrooms, but in 1 and 2 and 3 bedroom units?
1 and 2 bedrooms, that's
18-2 and 18-1, but it was out of interest from investors, and right now it's unknown if it'll be able, if that's even possible.
Okay. So are the lots already combined?
They are not. They're being combined.
Okay.
As far as the parking, I think the parking, again, what I want to comment on the parking, I believe, is I feel like a lot of people, including the planning department, are quoting, why are we parking so many? Again, they're right. We're parking more than we should, because we agree the parking in the streets, the standard code is not parking enough. And so we prefer to park it more. And again, that's really the driver to get us here.
That's not the issue raised. It's just, are your residents, whether it be condos or renters, going to be parking and applying for those street permits?
And they will be able to, but we're going to provide more parking than is required in the building. So if I did the 27 that all I'm required, then yes, there's 27 people that could go out and apply for parking permits.
Do you understand why these people next door are concerned? Because it might be easier for me to park on the street than to enter the building and go to a space and kind of run in my place than, and just get a permit and possibly take up spaces that neighbors would take up.
I understand that that's a concern. I think the word used easy, it's not easy to find a parking space there. And so that's why we're asking to provide a parking space in addition to what we are required to do. And that's why we continue to come back and say we want to provide 54 parking spaces. We don't want to provide 27 because it's not easy. And we 100% agree. It's not a good thing to have people parking on the streets. But again, I can't stop people from parking on the streets. What I can do is provide extra parking so that they do have spaces to come into the building and park. What our building will be different than out on the street is it will be a secured parking lot. It'll be behind gates. It'll be behind key fobs and clickers. And so the people that live there, they prefer that. Again, they prefer to be in an environment where their car is inside somewhere that is actually behind gates versus parking out in the street and exposed to the elements and to the people. So for us, again, we feel like we're continually asking to provide more, and again, which is the reason for our asking to build the footprint bigger. On the moving truck, again, on other developments we've done, including Note 16, we actually widen the alley, and that's a public works request. So we actually widen the alley, and then we're actually going to add a loading zone on the back of the alley. Again, do people go up and down it? Yes, the trash trucks go up and down it. Do people want to go up and down that alley? No, they don't prefer to. But again, we're talking about 18 units of move-ins. And this is not moving in every day. We're trying to provide areas, and we agree. There's not areas, it's not easy to find a spot for UPS, and I don't want UPS parking out in the middle of the street either. So we're going to provide loading zones, and again, that's part of what we've done on other jobs. That's why the 20-foot setback is great in the back, because it gives us room to put loading zones and those things to get people off of the street.
And I park in a parking garage every day. If I'm just trying to run in my house and I've got 2 levels to pick from versus 4, I'm probably going to go in the 2. If we have to do 4 levels of parking, that does encourage people to try to get the street permit. So I do understand the concern of, even though we're providing it, are they going to use it? I think with 2 levels, the answer is yes. With 4 levels, it's probably still yes because they know it's there, but it does encourage them a little bit more to try to go on the street.
Joey, I have a question. The special exception is for the setback and sky planes, but it's my understanding a special exception is dependent upon the plan that's proposed, and the plan that's proposed is for 18 3-bedroom units. And if that changes, do they have to come back here to reaffirm their setbacks? Because to me, it's a very different project if they increase the number of units, because it sounds to me like what you're asking for is maybe 36 units, but with 1 and 2 bedrooms. And that to me would be something that I would have felt like I had approved if I vote for this special exception.
If they pursue the SP, then no, it would not come here. The 18 is what they're permitted to do as a matter of right under base zoning. But your approval, could you condition to 18? If they file for a zone change for a zoning that allowed more, they would not have to come seek your reapproval for that. It wouldn't alter it anyway.
But it would still be under that the footprint that we would have approved today or discussed.
Well, if they apply for an SP, they would be applying for a footprint, a setback, sky plane, parking units, everything.
But I'm just saying, if we approve this footprint today, would that apply if it was rezoned SP?
Potentially no, but yes, the SP is a different animal in that it allows the planning department and the developers to alter base zoning or approvals of this board. So they could alter the setbacks under the SP. Now, whether that's their intent or not, that's something they can address. But your approval for setbacks aren't binding on the SP. The SP could overrule those or set different ones or. any other provision of the zoning.
Well, but isn't the point on that, Joey, that that's just a completely different process, and so they're going to suddenly be going through the Planning Commission and the council, so it's basically supplanting what we would do. I mean, that's an option they can do, but it's not as if they're taking ours and then doing what the heck they want to.
Okay. Thank you.
Right.
That helps.
And planning will require us to submit a much more detailed, fully designed elevation.
Yeah.
And so,
I think the other comment or question that came back to the group, what we have submitted does show a 60-foot height. Again, with the exception, we're willing to say, yes, we can cap at 60 feet if we get the 8-foot approved. Because again, then we know our height is where it is as far as the max height of the building. Again, I think for us, we're willing to do that. And again, this massing plan shows how we got there.
Yeah, about the massing, I'm just confused again, because when we were talking about the 2 stories above ground versus 4, and then you said no, it's 0 above ground or 2.
At the corner, at the northeast corner, it goes to 0.
I'm talking about at the alley.
Right.
How many will be above ground at the alley on what you proposed, the Plan A?
At the southeast corner, 1, as you move up the alley, it goes to 0 because it climbs 10 feet.
As you get closer to Wedgewood, it's 0.
Correct.
Okay. So 0 or 1 is what you all propose.
Right. And,
okay.
And
well,
otherwise,
zero again, and it's growing as it goes down the alley. But it's 0 at the lowest point. If we do what's today to get the same 54 parking, we are 2 above grade in the deepest spot in the back.
So in either case,
on the front, come to the front, we're 1 above and we're 3 above.
That's in Plan B. That's correct. That's if we don't do anything and you decide to build.
Then we have to go
land.
to 3. That's correct to hit the 54.
Now, all right. I don't see that in this drawing. So this drawing is still very confusing. So I appreciate you putting the drawing together, but this drawing to me says I've got at least 1, maybe 2 above grade at all levels. So I mean, I appreciate it, but it doesn't explain what you're trying to do to me.
Right.
And I wanted to touch back on the adverse effect of the neighbors in Arlington. Either way, we're going to be at 20 feet on the alley. And so moving the building forward won't really have an adverse effect on them, in my opinion. And Mr. Bryant did agree that he's comfortable with the 8 feet as long as we do approach to the 11. And that was addressed in the email that was sent to Joey. And I know that he said that, again, you heard him earlier.
I hate to make this too simple, but essentially you're trying to become wider so that you don't have to go as high, and so that you can park 54 in an attempt not to cause more parking stress, correct?
That's right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Either way, we'll park 54. It's how many floors of parking does it take?
Okay. I mean, sorry, I know I'm being simple.
I appreciate that. It is.
Well, and I think the 54 also gives them an option to potentially subdivide, or it would give them the option. I mean, if the plan potentially to have 1 and 2 bedroom units instead of all 3 bedroom units, you're going to have more parking for those. I mean, it widens your option to have 54 spots for what you can do with your property.
Well. Again,
but not by us.
No, right, exactly. No, we don't do anything. We're just saying, and we don't really have anything to do with the decision of 54. I mean, it's a better thing for the neighborhood to have 54 for 18 units than not. And it's a better decision to have 54 spaces for however many units you end up with than to have less. I guess the only other question I have is, and I'm still fairly concerned about, again, going back to the conditional support for the council lady and for the concerns of the planning department. And I'm wondering about your thoughts if we were to grant these setbacks, if you would be opposed to having them contingent upon approval by the planning department of the facade. I mean, you've obviously done many projects where you got their approval and worked with them, and if that were to be the case here, would you object to that approval of street setback and sky plane setback contingent on the planning department's approval?
I think my concern in saying that is we have the planning department speaking exactly against what your neighbors are speaking. And so, and the commissioner. Again, the commissioner is not wanting us up to the sidewalk, or council member is not wanting us up to the sidewalk either. The planning department is absolutely okay putting stuff in the setbacks that we're asking y'all to approve. So I'm concerned that we're now handing it to the planning department that's speaking exactly against what everybody else doesn't want.
Well, and I guess I was trying to think of if there was a condition for someone else's approval, what would make the most obvious? I wouldn't want to put the council lady in that position. I don't know that that's fair or even appropriate. But the 8-foot setback is against the planning department's original request too. So I mean, they're bound by that setback. So I guess what I'm concerned about is how do we get. I appreciate your word and I respect your word and I have no reason to doubt you, but it's that trust and verified concept of, if we're to trust that you're going to have those facade concerns met, then how is it verified? And that's where I'm trying to think through.
We want any exposed side to be consistent with the rest of the building, or any venting for the parking deck screened. I don't know if there's a way that we could come up with the condition or the wording of the condition and whose judgment call it is to say yes it does or no it doesn't, because we definitely have an intent. We know that it's obviously it leaves the door open if we can't lock something down, but I don't know how we can completely lock something down on facade through a special exception other than maybe saying those exact things, because that's what we want to do. That's what we're planning to do. But I know that there's still in the past, there's been the guy that doesn't follow through. I do know that we'll be back before you in the future. So if we don't follow through, then we might as well save our time. But I don't know how to really articulate that. I mean, would that be proper language to say that we do keep consistency in the screening of the parking and not expose any ventilation to the parking deck that is screened with either consistent materials or landscaping?
Well, see, my concern is once we get into aesthetics and, if we start making the language vague enough that it's workable, then it's also vague enough to be contestable. And I'm sure our lawyer would start to get squeamish on that. And I don't even think it's our bailiwick here to really talk about the aesthetics. I'm uncomfortable even talking about the materials of the building personally. I mean, that's I really don't think that's at issue, honestly. And I don't think that. I mean, we can certainly say whatever we want, but I just think we're overreaching when we get into that. And to lay out, I mean, it's such an ambiguous thing, an abstract notion, other than saying it's going to be this material. And, you can look at all sorts of subdivisions around the country that say, the front of your house has to be 80% brick, and it doesn't really make for better buildings or better looking buildings. It's just telling you how much of material you paint this part of it with and how much material you paint that part of it with. And that goes to screening and, if the professionals they're hiring do something that people think are ugly, then that's their professional problem. I don't think it's our deal to deal with, personally.
Any other questions?
The moving van?
The moving van, as we said, there'll be a paved loading zone area in the 20-foot setback where it could pull onto private property and park itself. I'm not sure. I don't know any other way to provide it. No matter which building we build, I'm not sure where the moving van parks for their development. It's the best we can do is pave the rear 20 feet and give them a place to pull off.
Are you relocating any of those utility poles?
It doesn't appear that we'll have to.
Well, I asked that because you mentioned the 20-foot area, and I don't know if you have a sufficient curb cut or if you have any control over the curb cut into the alley that would allow a moving truck to get in there and around the utility poles.
If they would prevent a vehicle from parking back there, then yes, they would have to be relocated. And there are none of the lines, none of the overhead poles back there are high transmission.
They just look like they're serving the houses.
Right.
Okay.
From what I remember, I think they're closer to the corner. There's one that is not serving the houses that will be torn down, and so that one should be out of the way. But it doesn't benefit us to leave it in place if it's.
So you would be okay with that being a condition that you would
right.
have a loading area for a.
That it's accessible to
that the truck can get to
a garbage, a garbage truck, a U-Haul truck. I'm not talking about a 54-foot, 60-foot big commercial moving truck. I don't know how we could tie it to that, because obviously they wouldn't be able to make the maneuver to get down an alley.
Any other questions about the board?
Well, this is not your first endeavor at this, and I think you're savvy enough, and I trust that you're savvy enough to know if it doesn't work for the tenants, it's certainly not going to work for the developer.
Right.
You could literally be digging your own demise in there if you don't do the right thing. So.
Absolutely. And we did have, the turnout at the neighborhood meetings was about consistent with about 16 people. Some of the people here in opposition today were not at the meeting. Most of them were. But please keep in mind the number of people that are not here and the couple letters of support that we do have, the conditional support from the councilwoman. And I'd like to see this become a good project.
Any other questions by the board? Okay, then I'm going to move to close the public hearing and start discussion. Slow down, everybody, slow down.
Well, I mean, my biggest concern is still that, for me to look at a special exception, I'd like to see more about what it looks like. And the massing drawing that we have is called a typical building massing, and I know that it's probably not exactly the building massing, and we know it's not exactly the building massing because it doesn't sink into the ground like we know it does on the back, on the alley side. So I think I said last time, and I have said this time, I don't really have too much problem in concept with the request, because I think that the planning department was supportive at first about it. In terms of height, the 2-foot difference that they're asking for doesn't seem to have a dramatic impact. Certainly the building itself will have a much more dramatic impact than the 2 feet. I'm glad they went back 8 feet, but I'm still stuck with this. Who is going to, on a special exception, who's going to make sure that we can kind of know what's going on? And that's why I go back to the planning department. And I would be inclined at this point, unless there's further discussion to sway me differently, that we grant these setbacks, but on the condition that that they negotiate with the planning department or some other entity. And if they get through that phase and they don't like what the planning department says, then they can come back to us and say, hey, you told us we could build it. Here's what we want to do. Can you take that restriction off? But I think there needs to be at least one more step, because I don't think we've been presented a full plan. And I understand it from their point of view. They want to make sure they can get these setbacks before they move forward that way. But I think they owe us more for a final approval.
Joey, if we approve this with no conditions per se, planning is done with this. They don't have any other role in this matter, right?
That's correct.
What if we were to do something as he discussed? What's the kind of procedure, protocol, or can we do that?
Can we tell planning to do something?
You can place any reasonable. The courts have said any reasonable condition. So
another look from planning would probably be deemed reasonable.
It could be.
They've looked at it before.
From the standpoint that I run into with when I say this board, I don't mean the 6 members before me, but boards, the 16 years I've been here, is be mindful of conditions you place upon appeals. Think to enforceability, because it's our office that has to enforce your conditions. So if it's vague from you, it's vague from us, which sets up a potential conflict. But to that effect, I believe you can condition subject to an approval. Now, you need to give us some guidelines of, is that something that needs to be transmitted to the board or to the codes department for permit issuance? Like you send them back to the planning commission for something. Is there something you want the planning to sign off for their building permit, or do you want it to come here to sort of reaffirm that, yes, this is what we meant before the codes department issues the permit? So some guidance from you all on how you wish to accomplish a condition like that.
And what if planning refuses to review it? Or does that leave the appellant?
We're looking at you. What do you want us to do with it if that happens?
I'm sorry, can I take a step back? Because I think it's been said very well, and I think it's accurate in everything that comes before us. There are competing interests, and I'm going to go back to the last meeting where the condos across the alley want it pushed up. The neighbor on the other side doesn't want it. Planning in this situation, I think, has a competing interest with the neighbors. And so I'm really loath to give planning complete power over what the project's going to look like when quite probably that's going to run into what the council person wants who's representing the people. And so I am really as hesitant as I can be to turn aesthetics over to the planning department. David Harper, you said this earlier, I think our job is to determine whether a wider, shorter project for the stated purpose of let's overpark as opposed to underpark is a good idea, and is that better than what they can build without us, versus turning over to another department and saying you get to determine over the rights of the neighbors or the council person what it's going to look like. That's just one man's opinion, and I'm perfectly comfortable with it being outvoted, but that's...
I agree with you, and I think I heard that not only was the Planning Commission's preference contradictory toward the neighborhood, it's also contradictory toward the developer. So, while I agree with your intent, I don't know that would gain me.
Yeah, I don't know how to accomplish what I want to accomplish without having a neighborhood design committee, which is not appropriate, and I don't support that. But I think we haven't had a whole lot of cases of this magnitude that came to us with this little information, and that's what I'm struggling with. And I don't like it. And we asked for more information, and we got a little bit, not a lot, and I don't like that. And I hope that. I don't know that everybody's required to do it, but I'm just saying that other proposals that we've seen were more thorough, and it was easier to make a decision. So I'm just trying to figure out how to make it easier to satisfy as many interests as possible, and there may not be a good way.
No, I agree with you. We don't have a lot of information, and particularly, planning talks about being pedestrian friendly and the facades and things like that, and we really don't know what these are going to look like in this very residential area. The council person obviously has been just very closely involved, having 2 meetings and all this, and has this conditional approval too as well. But no, if we approve this, there are certain things that could, I guess, come that if we saw, we might not have liked, or we might have suggested a different way. But since this is all that's in front of us, we're giving them, pretty broad approval for some other things.
And relative to my comments that I made earlier, I agree with David. I didn't want my comment to be taken to mean that I don't want to see what the massing. I am disappointed that there's not more detailed massing information. If this is if this massing is accurate and this is the envelope they're asking for, it's a pretty plain building. My comment was directed more towards I really don't want to get into specific materials and how much of this material and how much of that material, and
Things like windows and entrances and doors.
Stuff like that. I was frankly expecting, maybe in the way we deferred this, I don't remember what the motion was, but I find it a little disappointing, and I don't know where that leaves us. I don't know if it's appropriate to defer it again or not make a decision, or if they have to refile or what, or do we vote on it? Do we want to vote and take the chance of turning it down?
I'll take the hit on that. I asked for the massing in hopes that simple massing would show the impact of the property without going to the extent of having to design the fenestration of the walls, et cetera. And fine, I mean, that's where you get into the detailed drawing and consuming time and expense. And I'm not sure that the massing, I mean, to me, it showed me what I was looking for, but I'm not sure it satisfied the opposition. It may have gone to the opposite side from that. So,
well, for me, the massing, it addresses some of the issues that we have to decide on, and it doesn't on the others. As far as light and shadow and air, it does answer the question, and it sort of says, look, it's the extra 2 feet. That's one way to measure it. The 2 feet added onto this building. Is that the straw that breaks the camel's back, or do we compare it to what they could build if they weren't asking for the appeal? And there's more shadow than a taller building, arguably. So I think it answers that, and I don't know how a massing diagram can tell us if it's pedestrian friendly or not, unless you're talking about, are there 12 entrances on this street, or are there 8 entrances, or are there 2 entrances, or are there no entrances? Are there windows on the street at street level or not? Is the garage behind steel grates or louvers or whatever? That's what it can't really answer.
That's a big issue too. I mean, is the garage, how is it going to be screened? What's it going to look like from the street level? Is it going to be like, I'm trying to think what Baptist Hospital's parking garage looks like, or is it going to be more, I mean, given that they did note 16, I doubt it's going to look like that, but what will it look like? That's an issue. And I have another question for Joey. Joey, we talked about parking and street parking, and there's been a lot to do about street parking in this neighborhood and 12 South. Is this board allowed to basically say certain residents of certain buildings are not eligible for this Metro program?
Nope.
Yeah, and I mean, I do agree with the developers that if they have 54 spaces and that are easy to get to, most likely, who knows?
Well, they're paying for those 3 spaces already.
Yeah, I think it may or may not add to the street parking.
I mean, if people want to go out and spend the extra $10 for a 4th parking space after what they're already paying for the 3 parking spaces, I mean, who are we? Don't do that, but.
Well, by right, they can build a project without the exceptions that they need to ask us. So what is the downside if they do that? What's the downside to the neighborhood? I don't see.
Well, the people that are here basically said they'd rather taller and then smaller footprint. Obviously.
The developer points out that's the opposite of what Planning Commission and county impact overall for all of us.
Yes, but if we don't approve this, they could just go and build something and not come in front of us and walk down to Joey's office and get a permit.
If they provide plans, detailed plans that we didn't get.
I mean, how much of a material, I mean, it sounds like both of you all have concerns about that. I have concerns about that. I mean, how important is this?
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, I was looking for a reason to support it last time because I thought it just seemed to make sense for the urban nature of how things are evolving there, and I'm trying to do the same thing to say, well, how do you say yes when everybody is, Council Lady Allen is saying that we're having a good relationship, they're good conversations, it looks like it's heading in the right direction, and conditionally I support it, but there's still questions. And planning is saying early on were for it, but now they're saying, there's still a lot of questions. They're saying it's premature because there are things that haven't been addressed in a way. And I think that those are the things that will make or break this in terms of adhering to kind of that planning department's vision of a more pedestrian-friendly, dense environment. And I think that we just don't know. So that was why I had thought of, it doesn't sound like it's the best condition, but that was my motive of saying, well, gosh, are there conditions that we can put on this that will kind of let them move forward and yet make sure that it doesn't really kind of turn into a neighborhood disaster. I don't think it's going to.
I forgot what the council lady said as far as numbers, but I'm seeing 15 or 16 names on the meeting. And do we know what the opposition at the meeting was, or was anybody at the meeting in opposition? Or
we've gotten a couple of letters of support from them, and then of course the people that are here in opposition in the last meeting were opposition. You saw,
and of course the people that are here that we don't have letters from that are silent, they could simply been there out of curiosity. And
we asked for hands early in the meeting.
Oh, but I mean at this meeting. I'm sorry, at this meeting, the neighborhood meeting. I don't remember if she said what the tone of the meeting.
I don't personally think that the opposition and the appellant are all that far apart in coming to an agreement and making things work out here. I just don't.
Okay, and I'm just trying to translate, and I don't want to appear excessively grumpy, but we're being asked essentially two questions. Do the setbacks and the sky plane cause for a potentially better project than what they can build without us? And I hear the concerns that we don't really know what the project's going to look like, and I get that. But I'm not sure that's ever our role to determine the aesthetics of a project. I don't even really get to think the Planning Commission gets to do that. And if they go back to what base zoning and codes is, Joey's not going to get to determine aesthetics. Nobody's going to get to determine aesthetics. So to me, I think we have two questions, and I understand. I'd like to see the project too. I'd like to have glossy pictures and stuff. I'm just not sure that we get to do that, and I'm not sure we get to. Well, let me put it this way. It makes me just a bit queasy to say we're not going to grant your request until we see what we like, because then what happens? I mean, it comes up in front of us, and the seven of us, assuming Mercedes is here, say, I like that or I don't like that. I'm a corporate lawyer. How in the world am I supposed to decide that? I mean, I don't know. I understand the desire. I'm not questioning the desire. I just wonder if we're not getting a little bit further than our powers. That's just one man's opinion, and I lose votes all the time. So anyway.
I think if I had to make a choice right now and I weighed which one was the least impactful, to keep the footprint, the building goes taller. That obviously affects height and the sky plane to some degree. Only the sky plane is determined by the setback. I almost feel like it's less impactful if the building is shorter and a little wider. So I would lean toward supporting the request.
You want to make a motion?
Go for a motion.
All right. I tell you what, I'll make a motion if you'll potentially second it. I move that the board approve the special exception for street setbacks. The board finds that all the requirements of MCL 17.12.35D have been met. And as well, I move that the board approve the special exception for height and sky plane. The board finds that all the requirements of MCL 17.12.60F have been met.
We can put with the exception condition that parking for unloading be provided on the site.
Right, and I think out of fairness as well, we ought to put in Council Lady Berkeley Allen's requirements of 1 and 2, which are requiring the facade be designed in such a way as to break down the mass and height of the building at the street level, and materials for the facade be high quality, which would include brick, stone, and hardy plank, but not vinyl or aluminum siding or EFS.
And I second that.
Okay, so we've got a motion, we've got a second. Discussion?
Yeah, the only other thing is if we would ask that the developer consult the advice of Council Lady Allen on any questions or issues about the facade or neighborhood concerns. I mean, certainly not give there no approval, no authority, but to continue to use the Council Lady as an advisor to the project to help ease any issues that people might have. I mean, I think that's a given, but I think if it's stated, then it addresses some of the concern I have, but without authority.
Okay, I greatly appreciate that amendment. Thank you. Dick, I mean, you're still... Okay, so we've got a motion, we got a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes. Joey, I'm sorry, I was reading from the third. Joey, I was reading from the third paragraph of Berkeley Allen's letter, and I specifically read 1 and 2, but not 3.
Chairman, can we take a really, really quick recess?
Yes, let's take a 5-minute recess.
Okay, the board is back into session now. We'll call the next case before us is on page 1, case 2013-3, West End Land Development Company, LLP, the appellant and owner of the property located at 2304 West End Avenue, requesting in addition to a nonconforming use and is appealing the zoning administrator's interpretation in MULA UZO districts to replace the tri-panel 14 by 48 billboard facing to the northeast and replace it with a digital LED board. Referred to the board under section 1740-180 and 1740-660. The appellant has alleged the board would have jurisdiction under section 1740-180, item D. Being a item D in an item A case, the zoning administrator weighs in. You've received a letter from the zoning administrator. Is there any additional testimony, Bill, you want to add?
I learned immediately before this hearing that the 2 cases from the Chancery Court that are on appeal to the Court of Appeals were not consolidated. I don't know if it makes any difference for you all, but in my letter I put that I expected them to be consolidated. I heard that motion was denied yesterday.
So for the non-lawyers here, what does that really mean?
It means that both cases will be heard independently at the Court of Appeals.
Regardless of what we do here today?
The 2 cases, the Lamar case and the CBS case, they were both heard by the Chancery Court in Davidson County, one by one court, one by another court.
Okay. And is it the same issue?
Yes. There are 2 issues. Each court came down on separate issues. There are 2 issues. One court decided one way on one issue. The other court decided on the other issue. One is a standing issue and one's a substantive issue.
And are those cases that came through here?
Yes, I believe so.
So we're just going to keep throwing cases at them and see which ones bounce back, or?
Well, the point, I think, is...
They have the right to appeal in our decisions, and if they choose to do that, that's...
I'm fine with that part, but I'm curious why you guys can't make a decision based because the court haven't said you're wrong or you're right, so you don't have a precedent to follow yet.
That's correct. And
so
what I'm suggesting to you all is likely in sometime in the near future we will have a precedent because this issue is pending at the Court of Appeals.
And a legal question for our attorney, let's say a decision is made in the future on those other 2 cases and it is the opposite of our decision today, what does that do to this decision?
My guess is that would give them a pretty good right
to appeal.
So it wouldn't automatically change anything that we decide they would still have to appeal.
No, I mean, because the board,
if it's counter to what they want. I'm saying if it really doesn't matter. I mean, if whatever decision we made, I'm asking if the court made the opposite decision.
well, I mean, for instance, if this board said no, then certainly if the law changed, they probably have a pretty good shot at coming
Right.
back and asking for a permit, and it would never get to the board, because then.
Okay, and if we say yes and the other court says no, then they still get the yes. Okay.
Joey, from a strictly procedural matter, explain to us why we're hearing this case again and what happened the first time. Because this is the same sign on West End that we recently heard.
Yes, sir. This case originally came before this board, scheduled for a hearing on January the 3rd of this year. It's pretty thick file, as you can imagine. It was deferred.
Oh, we deferred it. Okay.
Did we get to public hearing on this?
The case.
The
case was adjourned on February 7 of this year due to failure to get 4 affirmative votes from 4 members present under your rules of procedure.
Yeah, see, that's what your footnote says in your brief, but I just wanted Joey to clarify that for everybody. So we heard this case and no one got 4 votes.
Yes, and that's where we're at. So it re-advertised, reset. It was deferred. I wouldn't say deferred, it's not the right word. It was put off a little bit, hoping the court would act because it would affect this case pre-hearing today, but the court hasn't gotten around to it just yet. So
this is basically they're asking for the exact same thing.
Yes, the facts of the case from in January or February are identical. They're unchanged, and I'm going to show you the photographs that we shot. I shot a few different shots. You'll notice there.
And not to get too nuanced, but that other case, none of that is on the record.
Correct. It stands on its own. Once it was reset and re-advertised, we did retain the same case
brand
number.
New case. So you get to argue.
Yeah, it's a de novo, brand new case. So
those feelings of deja vu may be real.
Yes, and it's very important since Ms. Chappell was not a member of this board. So I'll advise the rest of y'all, please do not discuss, hey, last time we said there was no last time. So this is brand new.
That's why I wanted to clear that part up too
thank
as well.
you.
Thank you very much.
But we did, for confusion, a lot of times on re-advertised cases, we'll assign a new case number. We thought, given the pending court history of other cases, it would be important to retain the case number throughout, should it have to go to court. All right. The subject property is located, again, on the north side of West End between 24th and 23rd Avenues North. It's in the MU-A district. This is the subject property. The current tenants in there include Office Depot, I believe FedEx Kinko's is in there. The billboard in question is located on the subject side about where my cursor is sitting, moving on the aerial photograph here. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. A little hard to describe that when you're not looking at what I'm looking at.
We believe that your cursor is on it. We just cannot see your cursor.
I promise I did not mislead you, but there you go. So, again, the billboard is located where my cursor is moving here. Again, item A appeal. The position of Metro government is that if they change this, they must comply with our regulations today. Obviously, the appellant disagrees with that discussion. Item D is listed because the billboard, as the recent rezoning occurred, the billboard itself is a non-conforming billboard. If there were no billboard on this site and they came to take out a permit to build one, we could not issue a permit because billboards are not allowed in this zone district. But it is an existing billboard. It is legally non-conforming. It has all required permits from our office at the time it was issued.
And I want to ask one more confusing question, and I think I may have asked this last time, maybe. But we have heard in the past a case specific to changing from a static billboard or a tri-panel board to an electronic board, and it had to do with the fact that the sign itself was non-conforming at the time. How Is that an issue here or not?
It is the same issue here.
The decision we rendered last time is non-precedential?
Correct.
So basically, the current use is part of this billboard is one of the tri-panel billboards, and then part of it is not. We'll let the applicant talk about that.
I'd really let the applicant cover that. Actually, part of this billboard is LED. At the time it was permitted to be so, it was placed upon there, and has since. Now the code has been rewritten to say you can't have LED billboards on this.
But they still have LED.
Yes, they do.
But we'll talk to the applicant. So.
Have I confused this enough for you, Mr. Henry?
No.
All right, perfect.
Scary enough, I'm still clear on it. This is looking west upon, out on West End Avenue. The billboard you see is located here where my cursor is, and in a view from the parking lot. This is the billboard in question. It is a double-faced billboard consisting of I'm going to start calling them old-fashioned billboards that are paper and glue or whatever is here. And then you have the tri-panel, which is by definition in the same category as your quote-unquote traditional old billboard. Again, on the back side, the traditional old, and then an LED panel these would be the inbound lanes toward downtown driving to the east. This is an LED panel, legally permitted at the time. The request is to take this panel, you see here, which is the tri-panel, and replace it with an LED board. So guys, I'll leave that up there. Typically, just procedurally, normally the zoning administrator goes first. I presume, Mr. Herbert, you're done speaking on the matter, so his time's up. Do you have any questions of the zoning administrator before we turn it over to the applicant? None. Other than the parties present, are there any other parties opposed or would like to input into this case? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Henry, you'll have 10 minutes. There's not really a rebuttal period. There's no one speaking in the third-party place of an item A, so I'll turn it over to you and let you present your testimony to this board.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Sean Henry with the law firm of Tune, Intrigan & White, representing American Outdoor Advertising. With me is Marty Williamson. He's the owner of the billboard company. The owner of the property is on your caption on your docket. They also joined us in this appeal. Since the questions were coming at you regarding the impact of the prior cases that have been before you, I want to comment on those. But first, just point of clarification, we're proposing to replace both the existing vinyl and the existing Tri-Vision with one LED board of the same size. So we're eliminating those two for one digital billboard, okay, on that side. I want to come through quickly the prior appeal cases and just, I guess for no other reason, get them on the record and draw distinctions between those and what we have in front of you today. And these are important distinctions. Case number 2011-089 is the 100 Franklin Pike property. That's the Corky's billboard on the edge of Brentwood. The zoning there was mixed use limited, but also an urban design overlay, a UDO. That was an item A case, and they were a Tri-Vision only. Case number 2012-044, this is property at 2730 Locust Street. That zoning was industrial warehouse distribution, IWD. It too was an item A case. It had a vinyl board proposing to convert to digital. Case number 2012-45, 700 Clinton Street. That property was zoned CF. It too was an item A case, and it too was a vinyl proposing to go to digital. This case, the 2304 West End Avenue, the zoning here is mixed use limited alternative. It's a different zoning district. It is an item A case and an item D case, and that's critically important here because we're here before you largely on the provisions of your zoning code dealing with nonconforming structure, nonconforming signs. And here, distinct from the others, we have all three types on this existing billboard. We have the vinyl, we have the Tri-Vision, and we have the existing digital on this board. So the facts...
I'm sorry, Mr. Were those other three cases, were those all non-conforming structures at the time also?
That I'm not entirely certain about, but okay. The import of that is that this board in each one of those cases agreed that they had the right to swap out digital in place of the vinyl, in place of the Trivision. And I believe the nonconforming may have been part of their argument, but it certainly was not part of their application before you. And that's important because in your caption here today, on your agenda, is an item D appeal. And that's because we're asking you to address the ability under your own zoning code, not sole reliance on state law, which these other cases were. They largely came before you and said state law allows us to do what we want to do. This board agreed in each of those three cases. In this case today, we submit that that is true, but we also submit under your zoning code, and I'll come through three reasons under your zoning code why we should be permitted to put the digital on this board. So if I may, again, there's no dispute that the billboard is legally non-conforming. The property was rezoned to mixed-use limited alternative zoning last September 24 by the Metro Council. So billboards are no longer allowed in the MULA district. LED message boards and digital display signs are no longer allowed in that district. But there are 5 districts in your zoning code that do allow digital billboards. Those districts are CS, CF, IWD, IR, IG. That's an important point that I'll touch on in just a second. But the effect of rezoning the property triggered the grandfather and non-conforming protections both in your Metro zoning code as well as state law. The billboard, a billboard is defined as a sign. So point number 1 here is we've got a billboard that is a non-conforming sign. And under section 174690C, non-conforming signs are expressly permitted to be altered. And I want to read this. If the alteration or repair is desired by the owner of the business existing on the effective date of the ordinance that made it non-conforming, in this case it was bill number 2011-898 that made the property, the billboard, non-conforming in September, the sign may be altered to any extent. To any extent. My client, acronym AOA, they're in the business of owning billboard signs. They owned this billboard when the zoning law was changed. They desire to alter one side of the billboard by replacing the 2 existing boards with 1 LED lighting sign, and they may do so under the non-conforming provision to any extent. So under that statement alone, I feel like I could end our argument and end our case right now. But there's more reasons why you should have overturned the zoning administrator in this case, and I'll go through those. But it's important to remember, I think, that the present owner can alter it to any extent. Secondly, non-conforming structures are permitted to be altered pursuant to section 66B, and I'm shortening up the section references here for brevity, but incidental or structural alterations may be made to a non-conforming structure provided there is no increase in the degree of non-conformity. And under section 66C, a non-conforming structure may be enlarged or converted to another permitted use, provided, again, there's no increase in the degree of non-conformity. We're reducing the degree of non-conformity here by taking down 2 signs and replacing it with 1. We're cutting the number of signs on this particular facade from 2 to 1. Certainly, there's no increase in the degree of non-conformity by doing that. Thirdly, section 650D allows a structure containing a non-conforming use, which is what we have here, a billboard structure, to make alterations other than incidental. If, however, this board believes that what we're proposing is more than a simple incidental alteration, the permit is required to be issued by this Board of Zoning Appeals. And we don't have a problem with that, except there's no criteria by which you are to judge whether or not we can do that. That section of the zoning code that allows you to issue that permit should provide you with some instructions, some guidance, criteria on how to do that. We don't have that. So there's some ambiguity in the zoning code on how that's to be done, and under the law, ambiguity in zoning laws favors the property owner. And there was a case here that I've referenced in my brief to you, the Demumbrian case, where the Tennessee Court of Appeals in 2011 talks about if the applicant satisfies their criteria, then they're entitled to have the permit. In this case, there really is no criteria before you. Those are the 3 points under your existing Metro nonconforming provisions. Under state law 137208, particularly item H, outdoor advertising industry not only may continue to operate billboards, but they may expand their operations. This case of Outdoor West was a Johnson City case in which the Court of Appeals allowed single-face signs to be enlarged and converted to double-face signs. So adding a whole nother side to the sign was permitted by the Court of Appeals in that case. And that was an effort to modernize those facilities and to allow them to better serve their advertising customers. Since then, and that was a 2000 case, since then our statute on nonconforming property rights has been amended to insert a 30-month time frame for ceasing the operation. I believe you're familiar with that. What's interesting about that particular section, 13728G, is that it allows a facility to construct, reconstruct, renovate, or be refurbished, or if an application has been filed to alter, renovate, or reconstruct a structure, it's allowed to continue in operation. That's really what we've done here. We are simply refurbishing, renovating, and continuing the operation of this billboard with modernizing techniques. So as a business establishment and operation, AOA should be able to do this because, number one, the location of the billboard is not changing. We're not changing the structure. The size of the billboard is not changing. It's remaining the same. The goal of advertising is not changing. It's the method by which the advertising is being performed through the use of a type of lighting that is already presently on the board, and therefore we're not changing that either. Secondly, and my final point here, and I've run out of time, is that there's already lighting illumination maximums for brightness in the zoning code. And the materials that we supply to you in our brief shows to you that we are complying with those. For example, no illumination in excess of 1/2 foot candle shall be permitted to cross a boundary of a residential property or a public street. We're complying with that. Importantly, and that's the Formetco June 5, 2013 letter, Exhibit 3 in your packet, goes to that very point. Again, the present LED sign that's on there complies with Metro's current lighting maximums on brightness. But there seems to be some ambiguity because the code now outlaws LED in certain zoning districts, but expressly permits them in at least 5 zoning districts. And so there's some lack of clarity there on really what we're trying to do in regulating the use of digital on billboards. Finally, state law permits billboards to have not only LED digital illumination, they did that in 2007 by the General Assembly, but also this year on May 14, the General Assembly passed a new law adopting brightness criteria and also requiring that a light sensing device be placed on every billboard prospectively, really beginning next year, 2014, that senses the ambient light changes. If a storm comes through during the day and it's very dark outside, that sensing device will dull down and dim down that billboard automatically. That's now a requirement of state law. My client's going to comply with that anyway.
Mr. you.
So
are we out of time?
Yes.
About the ambiguity issue, are you suggesting that we should decide in your favor on the ambiguity argument? Are you suggesting that Metro does not have the right to specify what's allowed in different districts? Or are you saying if it's allowed, it's allowed, or if it's not, it's not? Or
well, the issue I'm pointing out there,
or just because it is ambiguity.
The ambiguity in this provision is that if the LED light complies with the maximum illumination requirement, why is it prohibited from any district at all?
Okay.
So the lighting provisions, the brightness provisions apply countywide, but not the LED limitations. They are specific to certain zoning districts.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
I don't know why that is, other than there's some perception that an LED sign is different from other signs, and I think that was an argument that has been made here before. Some will say it is, and some will say it isn't. I'm assuming that you will say it isn't any different than a sign is a sign is a sign. So help me, I guess, with the argument that, and you may have already made it, so just restate it in words that I get, but why is the LED sign the same as other signs?
I'll let Mr. Williamson speak to that.
Well, I mean, in terms of the brightness?
And you're saying you're just repairing a sign with another sign, and some people may say, well, no, an LED isn't another sign. It's something different.
Well, it's just a different form of outdoor advertising. It's a different medium in terms of the way it's presented, but it's still showing an advertiser or advertisers, and with any changeable copy sign, whether it's a TriVision or digital, each image or advertiser stays fixed for 8 seconds. So in some ways, it's no different from the TriVision, except for the way that it's illuminated, and it allows you to have to accommodate more advertisers.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
If I may, Mr. Taylor, it's no different than any other type of material. It's an item that's on the structure to perform what the billboard is intended to perform. I liken it to the example of removing telephone pole wooden supports for billboards, which traditionally canvass the state, with monopole. The technological upgrade and the ability to keep a billboard up has gone from wooden supports, 5 or 6 of them in a row, to a single monopole. And I think that's exactly what we're talking about in the use of type of lighting.
Mr. Henry, I'm not trying to muck up your argument. I'm trying to make sure I understand it. 3 times this board, a signage company has come before this board, and we have found in their favor under state law each time. And all of those were item A appeals. One of those was appealed by Metro against us, and a Chancery Court overturned our decision, and that's now up on appeal. There's also a parallel case where Metro's standing to appeal our decision was dismissed. But you're saying, so in other words, the last court to rule on one of the Board of Zoning Appeals prior rulings overturned us. But you're saying there's a difference in the case before us today, because unlike those other 3 cases, this is not just an item A where we're asked to overturn the zoning administrator's decision. You're also telling us that this change and non-conforming use should be allowed under Metro's own zoning code, which I think is a new argument before us. I can't remember that being made. I hope I didn't muck up your argument. I'm just trying to follow.
That's correct. That's correct. And let me try to highlight the Chancellor's decision in the case. Chancellor Bonnyman, in her order in the case, which is the Lamar case dealing with the Corkies in Brentwood, made that decision not based on testimony provided to this Board of Zoning Appeals. It was a legal argument only, and the legal argument is that the limitation of lighting technology is somehow county-wide. And they rely upon a case out of Jefferson City called the Snapcoat case, where Jefferson City passed an ordinance outlawing fireworks in the city. And this case went all the way to the Tennessee Supreme Court just last year in 2012, because the fireworks seller said, "Now wait a minute, I'm non-conforming. I've been selling fireworks here forever, way before you passed that ordinance." And the Supreme Court, with Justice Koch ruling on this, said this is an ordinance of citywide application. It doesn't matter what you're zoned. It's really independent of zoning. It's health and safety. That argument was made to the Chancellor, and that was the basis by which the decision to overturn you was justified.
And it had not been made in front of us, if I remember correctly.
That's correct. It was not made in front of you. I submit to you that we're here not on a limitation of zoning based on something countywide. Let me restate it another way. If the law said that we're going to outlaw LED digital lighting on billboards and other signs, by the way, other signs, business signs can have LED lighting too. But if we're going to outlaw it countywide, I would submit here today that Chancellor Bonnyman got it right. But that's not what we have. What we have is that the ability to have digital lighting is permissive on on-premise signs, and it's permissive on billboards in 5 zoning districts. It's very much tied to how the property is zoned. That's not what that case was decided upon. That's not the basis of that decision.
So just to reiterate, you're saying that as far as you know, and I'll ask our counsel this question also, but the Chancery Court has not said in our previous decisions that have been appealed that we acted arbitrarily or capricious in our decision, but it was strictly based on issues not argued here.
That is not expressly stated in the order. I don't have a copy of that order in front of me. What I'm telling you is they cited this section, a couple of sections in the order for upholding or overturning your decision, and looked at the language in one of the sections of the zoning code and said that applies. That's a countywide health safety issue. We think that the SNAPCO case applies. We think the board got it wrong, and you're overturned.
Mr. Henry, speaking of countywide, we have non-conforming billboards all over the county. If we were to allow this billboard to be changed, wouldn't that be opening up basically a majority of the billboards in Davidson County being allowed to be digital?
I think every case stands on its own merits. I don't know the answer to that question. Clearly, the first section that I cited here is, the first question is, was the billboard owner, the owner at the time the billboard was made non-conforming? In our case, that is the case. I don't know if that's the case in other non-conforming billboards, but where the owner is still the owner, that he owned the billboard before it was made non-conforming, still owns it. That provision that I cited as point number 1 allows the owner to make alterations to a non-conforming sign to any extent. Whether that would apply to other situations, I don't know. I certainly think your decision here today will provide other opportunities for conversions, but I still think it would be a case-by-case analysis.
But speaking of the uniqueness of this particular case, this is kind of maddening in the sense that you literally have a regular billboard, a trifold, and a digital. There are probably not too many examples of all 3 on one pole.
Yes, sir, and that's why we feel so adamant about our legal position here, and why we think this decision is different and distinct from what Chancery Court in Davidson County has looked at so far. These facts, these circumstances, and the legal principle by which we're asking you to decide this today are completely different than what has been considered before us. I don't want to get too legalistic for our non-lawyers on the board, but the doctrine of stare decisis. There's a case from our Tennessee Supreme Court from 1973. It's Union Trust Company versus the Williamson County Board of Zoning Appeals, and the Supreme Court distinguishes res judicata and stare decisis and its applicability. And the court nailed down that this idea, stare decisis, being a precedent, a judge-made precedent in front of you that you must follow, only applies if the legal principles are exactly the same, and the facts are for the most part the same. The legal principle that we're here before you today is your non-conforming section of the zoning code, and it's section 17.40.640 through 690. Those provisions, and we're not hanging our hat necessarily on state law, but we're certainly not going to waive the right to do that. But we are asserting that we're different and distinct under the legal principle that your non-conforming rights in the Metro Zoning Code are as strong or stronger in the respects of what we're talking about here today than even state law. It's very clear.
Chairman, I'm going to have to, I'm sorry, David. I'm going to have to leave in a minute, but I wanted to ask a question of our counsel, and if this should come down to a non-decisive vote, I'll be happy to review the rest of this record. But I do want to get this question on record to our counsel. If in the cases that have been appealed that are still going, we haven't had any cases sent back to us with instruction on how to decide.
I mean, not that I'm aware of. I mean, I defer to Mr. Herbert here, because he would be the one that they would tell.
I don't recall any. I just wanted that on the record.
And I would say if they had, he would have direction on how to handle the.
Right. I know we've had cases in the past come back and they say, yeah, you got to consider this, not that, or whatever. And do you know, and you may not know this, might not be a fair question, but to the issue that I was asking about earlier, where they've overturned our decision, do you know if it was based, or if it's clear what it was based on?
I don't know.
Okay.
I can speak to that. The Lamar case was based upon the SNAPCO decision that Mr. Henry set forth. I was at the argument at the Chancery Court, and the decision was based upon that, based upon the overriding police power of the city to regulate fireworks citywide in that case. The other case was decided on the standing issue alone and did not go to the merits that we're discussing today.
All right, thank you. And I must excuse myself for the rest of the hearing.
Okay, so I hate to bludgeon this. It's just I don't like to disagree with courts. But if I'm understanding your argument, the Chancery Court that overturned us, this case before us, you're giving us, or you're arguing, another legal avenue, namely non-conforming use under Metro's own code, as opposed to our previous decisions under state law. And so essentially, if the board found in your favor, we could agree with the court's decision and acknowledge it, yet still travel under the Metro code and find in your favor.
To the extent that you want to acknowledge the court's decision, you could acknowledge the fact that it's limited under the legal principles of state law, the application of state law. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not actually talking about acknowledging it. It's just, it would be, I guess, making a decision and not having that decision be in direct opposition to the previous Chancery Court decision.
Correct. Yeah, the basis of why we are in front of you and the legal precept of what we are here on is different than what that prior case turned on. And if I might add, the other case is where another chancellor in Davidson County found that the Metro government has no standing in which to sue you, its own Board of Zoning Appeals. So if you should side with us here today, we've got no opposition. We have a letter I failed to mention from Council Lady Edith Langster, who actually provided this for the February 7 hearing here, and she's unaware of any neighborhood opposition. She supports the proposal, especially since it allows the opportunity for Metro to post important public service announcements on this digital billboard, which my client has offered to do. And I do have a few things here to just file for the record, if I may, Mr. Secretary, including that letter. My point is there's no opposition here today. There's really no aggrievement that can be established by your action of approval here today. And again, there wouldn't be any standing for anyone to challenge this board if that case, which is presently at the Court of Appeals, is upheld, and that there's really it doesn't make sense for the government to sue one of its own subdivisions, its Board of Zoning Appeals.
Mr. Henry, did I hear you say earlier that the size was not changing on the sign?
That's correct. Presently, the two signs measure 14 feet by 48 feet. Those two signs within that size frame will be replaced with one sign of that size.
And Metro does have some sort of law that restricts it to one side, or you'd be asking for both sides of full digital, correct? Why aren't you asking for both sides to be a one digital panel?
Answer that.
Well, the inbound left-hand reading face that already is a partial digital has a building sitting that blocks the left half of it. So it's being used by a local restaurant right under the sign, which is.
So that's really the reason, because the building
it's a
would
practical
obstruct
reason.
it. So
yes.
Okay.
So what is the nonconformity?
The nonconformity was created by the rezoning of the property to MULA, Mixed Use Limited Alternative, in September of last year. We had no nonconformity until September 24 of 2012. Completely legal. But on September 24 of 2012, council passed BL 2011-898 and rezoned the property from CS to MULA. The net effect of that was it outlawed the billboard that's there, and it outlawed the LED digital that's there. It outlawed the structure. It outlawed everything. And so that's why we're here before you. My client submitted an application for this conversion to one-sided digital in November. The zoning administrator denied that based on the things that were already taking place in the local court. So we filed to come here before you on February 7, and we've been deferred to this date.
So is the digital non-conforming?
It was made, no, it was legally installed. The digital facing west was installed pursuant to a permit, and in my footnote on the very front page of the submittal to you, I referenced that permit number. The digital portion was permitted and installed on November 11, 2010, pursuant to a signed permit that I referenced there is 2010-38903. So everything on the board was legally installed pursuant to a permit.
Do you think that Metro and the council, I guess, has the right to regulate digital billboards and have, 200 feet or 500 feet that you can't have one run after another? Do they have the right to do that?
I've not seen any case law to indicate that they do not have a right to do that. Certainly our state, through the Highway Beautification Act of 1972, the federal government said, states, you need to regulate billboards along our major interstate highways. That authority has been relegated to our Department of Transportation, and they have regulations that address billboards and spacing of billboards. I suspect Metro has the authority to do that.
But I get that, Mr. Henry, but what I don't understand is basically if there's a billboard down the street at a gas station on West End or somewhere nearby, and that the law says 2,000 or whatever between digital billboards, why are they arbitrarily saying you could only have digital billboards to a certain distance, but yet these other billboards exist? Because it's a race to the permit office. Whoever gets there first plants their flag, they get a digital, and the person that has a digital billboard 200 feet away, they're out of luck.
No, I think Metro's outlaw and regulation based on the type of lighting, digital or LED, is suspect. I think it's got a real problem. I mean, you liken that to a piece of technology, and by the way, it's more green to use LED and digital. We're not removing any vinyl. We're not removing any paper. It's an instantaneous change in the message as opposed to the tri-vision. Those panels take some time to rotate. We've got studies in what we've submitted to you that shows that even that is distracting, but yet the use of digital and LED on billboards has not been shown to be distracting enough to affect driver safety. And we've got 2 studies in the documentation that we presented to you on that. So I think, unfortunately, the law in Metro outlawing LED digital billboards is based on an assumption that's not been proven that they're somehow unsafe. And there's no proof on that at all. And so I think the way it's being regulated, I think, is suspect.
Has there been a decision on whether or not changing a static billboard to a digital is a change of use for that sign?
There has not been a decision on that to my knowledge, a change in use. Now, I understand there was a time before you that the Metro Planning Department was making a case that they felt like if you're changing the method of lighting or the style of lighting, they were of the opinion at that time, this has been a couple years ago, I think it was 2010, in a memorandum to you, that they thought that was a change in use. The use is the advertisement. The issue here before you, and the question is, does it really make a difference on how that advertisement is being conveyed if it complies with your maximum brightness provisions?
Is that bill still read like that change you can't change it, have a change of use, you can't, what was it?
Well, what Mr. Henry talks about is the opinion by memorandum of planning department. Now, if that's the belief of Metro government, certainly the council can enact ordinance that specifies that digital is a different, distinct use from tri-panel, from static. The only action the council's taken is to say that static and tri-panel are the same. They don't spell out that digital is a separate, distinct use from it. Could they? Yes. They to this point have not.
So they don't say it's different, nor do they say it's the same. That they don't.
I think they say it's the same from the point of use, advertising, but it's different in the manner in which it's displayed.
Any other questions?
For me.
Okay, I'd say we close the public hearing and then have discussion.
I have a question either for the board or for Joey. I'm not sure. I'm a little unclear, and maybe it's because I haven't been here long enough, but in the code section that the applicant is relying on, it says that a sign shall be brought into compliance. I'm talking about 17.4690C. I mean, of course, in this case, does that mean they don't get to have a sign? I don't. What does that mean?
That means. Let me back up just a little bit. Billboards and when you think billboard and you think ground signage, they're all the same as far as our code. So 690 of ours talks about the damage or destruction. For us, we've always enforced that, looking at a monetary value, that if I took the frame, now I'm speaking to not billboards, but if I take that can down, the pole's still there, the value of the pole is in excess of 50% of the value of that sign. So they have not destroyed it for our purposes. And that's essentially the same argument here, is that the pole itself, the monopole that holds this structure, this sign up, the value, the dollar cost is there. That by retaining that, they have not destroyed this sign. Just replacing faces or types of faces is not a destruction under our code. And I hope that.
Well, I don't think, but I think what they're relying on, and if I'm going off base, feel free to stop me, but I think what they're relying on, that doesn't apply, I don't think, if the business existed at the time that it became non-conforming. And so in their case, I'm not asking about the value. Is there at any point do they not get to keep this billboard? What has to happen for them not to have the billboard?
I think for that to occur, and just going off case law, the owner would not only have to remove and destroy the sign, they would have to intend to abandon. So that's what's not in our code, but the case law is clear that the owner not just tearing the sign down is enough, he has to completely make some act that shows intent to completely abandon this use in the future, and then do so for a 30-month period.
All right.
And that's not implicit in our code as you read it. The courts have said, yes, it takes that intent. Just walking away from the sign and not putting any advertisement on it's not enough. It could sit out here blank for 50 years. He's not abandoned that sign. That makes it hard on us that administer a code, and likely other zoning folks across the state. It would be much easier from our standpoint to measure it, that just inactivity on its own is enough to mean abandoned, but the courts have clear that that's not enough.
Thank you.
And Joey, will you just explain, this is part of Mr. Henry's presentation, but it's not something we've talked about, but it's something I've been curious about ever since the sign went up. 1720 West End Avenue, the First State building, has a big, giant digital sign on the side of it, which I would have called a billboard, but my Exhibit 4 here says it's not a billboard, and I don't think it was anything that came before us.
That came from Mr. Henry.
Yeah, so tell me about, that.
Sure.
Because it seems like it's a sign and not a billboard, and we're getting into what's a billboard and what's a sign. And
help me understand all that.
Certainly. For the layperson, even myself, before getting into this life of zoning, if I saw that, I would say that's a billboard. But by definition, it is not. And the council created that definition expressly saying that commercially zoned properties are permitted not only to advertise on-premise things going on, but also allowed to advertise off-premise things.
Right. For example, when the arena originally opened, there's signs on the sides, and the only things that you could advertise were the Predators. That changed now. They have jewelry companies and moving companies and other things that have nothing to do with what goes on the inside of the arena. And so that's what you were talking about.
And the ordinance that created the arena's ability to advertise off-premise stuff allowed all other businesses to advertise off-premise stuff. Probably much to the chagrin of the billboard companies themselves, in that business. That's my opinion. I'm editorializing, but to say then you opened up the ability for
so in the old days, if you had that building on West End and ABC Bank was there and ABC Restaurant was there, the only things that could be on that facade were advertising things that are actually in that building. Because of the arena case and changing that, you can now take the car dealership or the soft drink company or whoever.
Yes, to answer your question, that's when you see those occurring, isn't that a billboard? It's not by definition, and because the council created the exception to the normal rules of advertising, that normally you would think a business can only advertise the stuff going on with their business. There is this exception in the code that allows for off-premise advertising.
Thank you. I've got kind of a series of random thoughts, but it's driving me a direction. One, I think, unless on my time on the board, we've only been overturned twice, and one of them was in a case that's very similar to this one, even though we had pretty consistently ruled on the opposite side. And in that situation, it was actually Metro that appealed us, and now we've got and we were overturned on an argument that was never even made in front of us, and nobody ever really overturned our arguments. But there's now been a second case where at least a Chancery Court has said that Metro doesn't even have the right to appeal us. And my other random thought is I don't like to disagree with the zoning administrator because I usually think he's a heck of a lot smarter than we are. But I'm having a really hard time reading Metro's own zoning ordinance where it says, talking about signs, if the alteration or repair is desired by the owner of the business existing on the effective date of the ordinance codified in this title, the sign may be altered or repaired to any extent. I don't know. I mean, that's 17.40.690C. I don't know.
Public hearing.
Public hearing's been closed.
I missed that.
Public hearing's been closed.
Can we ask our zoning administrator about that then?
I'm going to read. Well, I've submitted 2 letters to this board. The first one was at the first hearing, and it was one sentence. And here's what it said. It said, while I do not disagree with the applicant's position, I am precluded by a recent court decision from issuing the permit. I think that maybe that lets you know what I really think about this. So then I submitted a new letter to you for this board hearing, and I'm going to read it to you. It's 2 sentences long. And it says, while I do not disagree with the applicant's position, I am precluded by a recent court decision from issuing the permit. Notably, since the date of my previous letter to the board in this matter, a competing decision has been rendered by another court in another case. Both cases have been appealed to the Court of Appeals and are expected to be consolidated on appeal. I'm sorry, it's 3 sentences. And we now know that they were not going to be consolidated on appeal. All that being said, there is a different aspect to this case, and that being the item D appeal. I am only opining on the item A portion of this, and right now what I've got is the Chancery Court decision, but I wanted to clearly draw attention to the fact that what was the basis of the item A appeal is now pending in the Court of Appeals. So I hope that helps clarify where I am on this.
And I'm sorry, what I was really saying is that this case is different than those other ones before us because it's got the item D portion. So let's potentially agree with the court, and let's potentially kind of agree with our zoning administrator. We've still got the item D part, and I don't know, I mean, if you go to page 2 of their brief, I don't know how to disagree with that statement when a non-conforming sign can be altered or repaired to any extent. I just don't know how to argue with that.
I agree with you completely. That's why I asked, because that first sentence of the provision says it shall be brought in compliance. That's not possible. I don't see any way around his argument here.
And I think that was, if I remember, it's been a while on that Corky case, which was either my first meeting or second meeting, and I voted on the side to allow the sign and got sued by my city, and that was my welcome to this board. And that was I think what it boiled down to, and that's why I was asking earlier about, is a sign a sign a sign, and I think that's what we were talking about. It's like, if you're just repairing a sign with another sign, then it seemed clear that you have the right to do that, and we never got a compelling argument that a digital sign was so radically different than the other forms of signage, really any way you look at it, that we would have to vote the other way. So I don't know if that was the logic seemed to be the same. At least that was the argument that I think was being made then and is being made now.
And members, from a procedural standpoint, I'm talking procedural through appealing. An appeal of item D is not saying, hey, give me a permit because 690D says I can replace it. Item D under your power says they may meet that requirement, but they still have to come here because item D of your power say that you guys determine whether it's appropriateness to change non-conforming uses or structures. So I just want you, just from a procedural standpoint, the item A appeal is one thing, but an item D is saying, item A is saying, I'm not subject to your jurisdiction because state law protects me. He's saying, I am subject to your jurisdiction under your own rules under item D that says I have to come to you to ask to change this structure or use. And that, I didn't want you to take that because he may comply with the provisions of 690. He's still subject to your jurisdiction under that. Back to my point. In making your motion, please cover both A and D. Don't make an item A, we rule to overturn the zoning administrator because it conforms with 690. You couldn't do that. I need you to separate your, for the purpose of an order.
I'm sorry, explain that further.
Okay, so for the purposes of an order, this is both an item A appeal, but also an item D appeal. So I wouldn't want you to make a motion on item A that you're overturning the zoning administrator because it conforms with 690. 690 says you have to go to the board and get permission. So I want you also additionally craft an order, should you agree to approve it, that you determine that it's appropriate, and here's why.
In other words, and this is a question, so correct me if I'm wrong, we could uphold the zoning administrator under the item A portion, but then rule in favor of the applicant under the item D portion under 690C.
Or vice versa, yes, sir.
Or vice versa.
Joey, I have a question about nonconformity in this site, okay? So are there degrees of nonconformity, or is it just nonconforming or not as far as these billboards? So take this particular case as an example. It's nonconforming, it's on the record, but are there lesser degrees or increased degrees of nonconformity?
I would think it's inherently that, yes, there are, because our code says you all are to determine whether the change would increase the degree. So it's implied there is some degree of, not like this is more nonconforming than this, but that determination is up to you all. Because, looking at your powers under under 1740-180, it says that the board shall determine the appropriateness of proposed changes to nonconforming uses or structures.
But we don't have any rules about this nonconformity. It would just be somebody saying, well, I think because they did this, it's even more nonconforming. I mean, is that really what they were wanting us to do?
See, in 660, as the applicant talked about it, it talks about the board.
And that's what I'm getting at, 660, that basically talks about as long as there's no increase in the degree of nonconformity.
Right.
And I'm not necessarily sure.
Well, correct. So that's set up. It's saying provided there's no increase in nonconformity. But what that's saying to is that's your guide. That is your basis in determining under your powers under D whether there's an increase or not an increase. But it's sort of, although it talks about under your powers, the item D, that you're to hear cases.
But here is my point on that. With this recent law that Metro passed, the whole billboard is nonconforming because no billboards are allowed. And so the question is, would a digital billboard be even more nonconforming?
And that's, you have to answer.
I think that's what this comes down to.
Yes, it does.
It really does, you know. But because of that law that Mr. Henry talked about recently, you couldn't put, if there wasn't a billboard on that property, you couldn't put a new one on there. So therefore, the current billboard on there is non-conforming, no matter if it was digital, regular, trifold. And so we have to determine under 660 is allowing them to have a digital billboard increasing a degree of non-conformity.
Yes, and also let me, for purpose, I say this for purposes of attempting to clarify, 660 in our own code says for uses or for structures not otherwise protected by 137208. So there's not, you know, some court is going to determine 137208. So, you know, part of the argument why these others have come to you, they're saying they're just pointing to state law and saying state law says I can do it, I can do it. 660 should only cover stuff state law doesn't cover. So it's still up in the air, does state law cover this in the courts? But if you're to find that, that's why the applicant.
But how can state law not cover 660 because they have a billboard on that site and it's now non-conforming?
Well, the court again is going to have to ultimately make that decision, which would help Bill and I.
Because that's the way. That's the reason they're allowed to keep their billboard. Correct. Because of state law. You just can't lose your billboard because the Metro Council decides, well, we're not going to have any billboards. That's in there. Right. So they get to hang their hat on state law in saying that it's non-conforming, but we get to keep this use.
That's why it's important. This case is distinctive from the others because this applicant is saying, hey, even if state law doesn't protect these, under your own law, here's 660, and that's why I'm appealing to you under both precepts. So one the state's going to cover, and the other he's coming to you saying if the state doesn't cover it, your own ordinance covers it, and here's how.
You know, my opinion about this is, you know, I don't know what the degrees of nonconformity. The billboard's already nonconforming, and whether there be digital on there or not, I don't see anything under our laws that basically addresses that it's more nonconforming or not.
Hey, David, I'm just trying to make sure you and I aren't talking past each other. I think the applicants made 3 arguments under the Metro ordinance, and you're focused on 660B.
Yeah.
And I agree, figuring out degree of nonconformity is a tough animal. But I think even if we find under 690C, you know, the one above, which is they get to alter or repair to any extent. Are you saying that as well? I'm just trying to make sure. I mean, because I think it's an or.
I agree. I'm agreeing with that part, but I'm looking at the other part too, which I think it's in the law and it's very specific. It's more specific in certain ways to this case than the other because they're wanting to because we're all debating the degrees of nonconformity, and this is a nonconforming billboard. There's no question about that. So I'm trying to find if there's a way that there's no kind of scale of nonconformity, and so I just don't.
Well, it's easier if there's opposition to have someone come and say, well, no, this is, you know, the thing that when we had one non-conforming use go into another non-conforming use not too long ago where we had a retail store that folks wanted to have a popsicle shop and ended up being a restaurant. So we debated, is it going to be more non-conforming, and we decided, no, it's kind of about the same there. But we had kind of pros and cons, and we could talk it through. And the only way I would know to measure it is through some of the information and the studies that have been presented, which don't seem to provide, at least on this side of things, a whole lot of evidence that says, no, this is a radically different type of sign. I mean, the evidence they presented said it is probably not more conforming because of the studies.
Well, clearly digital is different than regular billboards, but I'm just kind of looking into the degree of nonconformity, and I don't see, from a legal standpoint, we can say whether a digital is more nonconforming than a trifold or a non-digital.
Does it make a difference to you?
I see
if
that.
you think, because 690 applies to nonconforming signs, and we're talking about structures under 660.
Well, it's about just the alteration of it. And so, and that's why I get back to, we're looking at the billboard as being a non-conforming thing, the whole thing, because you can't have a billboard today on that site if there wasn't one there. So to me, 660 is a bigger question than the 690C. And that's why I'm trying to get my arms around it and see if,
feel like doubling the size of the LED would be more non-conforming?
I don't think our code tells us what, I think in our code it's either non-conforming or not. I don't see, particularly as it relates to billboards, there being degrees of non-conformity. I can't see anywhere in our code where it discusses that. And I might feel differently if this was a currently legal billboard and the Metro Council had not passed this bill recently saying you can't have that billboard in that area, and therefore that billboard has become non-conforming. And so you can't be double non-conforming or triple non-conforming, in my opinion. So once you reach that point, then I think this law applies, the 660B. And I don't know what an increase in degree of nonconforming is, and I haven't seen it.
So does all that mean you're for the billboard or not? It's like,
I support the applicant. That's okay. Under that. Yeah. Because of what Metro did with the sign law, I think that's where I hang my hat, because the billboard is automatically now nonconforming. And it can't be more non-conforming just because it's a digital billboard.
So when Metro allows the digital certain zones?
Yes, there are certain zones, and that's some. But that's a different case, and there's some probably areas of town where a digital billboard isn't a non-conforming use. But here, the fact that it's just a billboard, it's a non-conforming use.
So doesn't that itself say that the digital billboard can be more non-conforming if it's twice as big?
I don't think. I think once you're non-conforming, you're non-conforming. I don't think structure. Because in my opinion, that sign, if that sign wasn't there, you couldn't put it up today, even if it was just a regular old-fashioned plain billboard paper. And so when it talks about degrees of nonconformity, you're already there. And there's no guidance anywhere that I see that talks about it making it more non-conforming, and just because it's a digital billboard. Because once again, because of what the council did, that sign is now non-conforming. And if it wasn't non-conforming, I might feel differently, but it is.
I have no idea if this will get a second or not, but in deference to the Chancery Court's opinion that overruled one of our previous decisions, I move that with respect to the item A, that the board uphold the decision of the zoning administrator. However, I move that we find in favor of the applicant with respect to the item D, because they have met the requirements of 17.40.690C, and as well, they've met the requirements of 17.40.660B because you're not increasing the degree of nonconformity.
And I'll second that.
Okay, so we've got a motion, we've got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay, so we've got a 4-1 decision.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I guess in theory, David Harper could come in and make it 4-2 or 5-1, but it passes.
Yep. Actually, no, but since we have a deciding vote, neither he nor Mercedes become involved in it at this point. Members, we do have one additional case on our agenda today. Let me pull up the last and final case today, 2013-57. Mr. David Rodriguez is the appellant. Mr. Frank and Micah Caputo, owners of the property located at 1515 Boscobel Street, requesting, in addition to the non-conforming structure in R6, UZO to construct a 35 by 39 two-story L-shaped addition to the right and rear side and a second floor addition to the non-conforming structure. Referred to the board under section 1740-660C, the appellant has alleged the board would have jurisdiction under section 1740-180, item D. The applicant's present, opposition present as well. So each side will have 15 minutes. Let me explain for you all the case here. Proceed. The subject property is located on Boscobel Street, just west of South 16th Street. It is in the R6 zoning district. The existing residence, which you see on the property here today, is located in this area. The request is for the applicant to renovate the existing structure, and I think it's important to point out, and I talked to the applicant and the opposition prior to today's hearing, but I want to explain to you guys, the existing structure must remain, and it must at least 50% of this structure remain for it to retain any grandfathering provisions. If you understand, under state law, 1 and 2 family dwellings have no protections under state law. So if this structure were to be demolished down to its foundations, it's gone and must comply with the zoning code. So in order to maintain its setback off of Boscobel, 50% of this residence must be maintained. The applicant assures me he intends to do so, and with that, he can petition this board to put an addition on that structure. The nonconformity in this case is its existing structure's proximity to the side property line. That is where the nonconformity occurs. Also, it's nonconforming as to the street setback today. These boxes which you see where my cursor is located here and here, if this structure were to be demolished, his setback is the average of those two homes' setbacks. So he's, as you can tell, he's grandfathered there as well. But it comes to you under item D of your powers under section 1740-180 to determine the appropriateness of any proposed changes. He does show an addition for, in this, when I cited the L shape, it is a 2-story addition, so footprints expanding and then going vertical upon the new footprint, as well as showing a deck being located to the rear of the residence. This is looking at the subject property. The homes to either side that you saw in the prior one sits back in this location. I believe that's the folks that are present here today, and then the house adjoining lot sits to the right-hand side here. These are views looking west along Boscobel Street. And then again, that home that sits back further, this would be the addition location in this area as far as the foot setback and the deck that's being constructed. And then a view addition would come off the side of the residence here.
Joey, I'm sorry I stepped out. Why is this a non-conforming structure?
The structure is non-conforming because the existing setback along the left-hand side property line is closer than 5 feet, as is required by the code, and also the front setback is non-conforming because the setback now for this home is the average of these two homes. As you can see, this home sits further back and sort of skews the average greater. Here, the setback should, I believe we averaged out, looked at, it'd probably be 40 feet is what's required today. So somewhat differentiating it from the other case that you just heard, there are no protections under state law for any residences. If something were to happen to the structure, it burned to the ground, a tornado gets it, he has to comply with the local zoning regs. There's no vesting in that old site location. So when folks approach us to add on to grandfathered houses, they have to be careful on how much destruction to that house they cause, or how much of that house they wish to retain.
And do we know how did it get to be built as a non-conforming house?
At the time it was constructed, it was conforming with the code. The code has since changed and requires different setbacks today.
But in this case, there's no destruction, there's just pure addition, right?
There's some renovation to it that would alter, and I'll let the applicant address that to it. We felt in discussing with him first, he first approached us of raising the entire structure and rebuilding it like you see here, and we're like, that's not possible. But we discussed with him that 50% of this structure must remain to save your protections in it. But I'd like for him to address those, how much he's going to alter this structure. With that, I'll turn it over to you guys. Again, we do have parties present on the opposition side, so each party will have 15 minutes to address.
I appreciate your time and looking this over for us. I am the current owner. We just purchased the property. I'm also a developer. And we are currently planning to do the addition as shown. The only area that's actually non-conforming that we're asking for a variance is the right corner, the right front corner. It's where it says 8.7 feet back to the setback line, which is 40 feet. And the hardship that we have is that there is a water easement, drainage easement that goes directly behind the house, which are those lines that you see going horizontally. And basically, the house would be sitting right on top of that stormwater easement if we were to demolish the house and meet the existing requirements. So without getting into too much detail, essentially what we're looking to do is keep the existing structure, simply do an addition within that footprint that's marked in yellow. We would meet the setback requirements on the left-hand side by having it, 5 foot off the property line. And then we would add basically just be a two-story, convert it to two-story home. So we would keep the 4 exterior walls. We would remove the roof and add a second story. We've had the look and the value of the property. We're actually looking to quadruple the value of the home to do a very high-end, historic craftsman-style home. And in a nutshell, that's kind of what we're looking to do. I think the only question is that front right corner, being able to square off the front of the house is going to make it aesthetically look a lot better than having it, if we went conforming, it would have a, chunk missing off the front right corner, which would hurt it. Another thing we're looking at is currently we could go 3 stories to get the square footage if we had to have that smaller footprint, but aesthetically it'll look a lot better if we can square it off and just make it 2 stories by having the variance. So I think that's pretty much the bulk of the information.
Is the easement who's the easement with, the water easement?
Currently, it's not listed as a waterway.
It's just stormwater.
It's a ditch.
You're not allowed to build by the
We can't
city.
build on it.
Okay.
And all the neighbors to the right, I say all, there's only 3 neighbors to the right before that street ends, and they're all in line with our house. So the setback doesn't change until the neighbor to the left, who just demolished and built that home, he's actually still under construction. And the reason he set the property so far back, his home, is because of that waterway. His house, the front of his house is literally almost touching the ditch right there.
So there is water in there often?
There is. When it rains, it's not listed. I met with Stormwater Division, and it's not listed as a blue water stream, but it is when it rains, it
We've
runs.
had some pretty hard rains recently, so it...
Oh, yeah, it runs. There's a little bridge on it.
There's even a bridge?
Yeah. Well, just a little wooden bridge.
Yeah,
to walk
but obviously
over.
somebody...
Yeah.
The A side is presently 3 feet from the property line at that back corner. Am I reading that right?
Yes, sir. And we would the addition would be conforming because we would have it 5 foot, which is the current setback regulation.
And the addition would be 2-story?
Yes.
What about the existing A side? Would that become 2-story?
It would all be 2-story. You would never be able to tell it was an addition.
So you propose to extend the 2-foot over extension of the line right now up another story?
Correct. We would keep the exact same footprint that's there, simply adding another story on it.
And it is single. Is it 2-family now, and is it a duplex now, and you're going to make it single family?
No, it's we met with zoning about doing a horizontal regime to have it where it's a condo. So there's 2 units, 1,400 square foot each, and again, real high end, finishes, and it's not going to be a rental type. Currently, to the left, there's quite a few like rental duplexes and lower income housing, but this is going to be very high end, so it'll definitely be increase the property value in the area.
Clarification purposes, the current use is single-family dwelling.
Yes.
And duplexes are permitted. Currently, it's a single-family use now. Duplexes are permitted here.
Do we have any other questions, or should we allow the opposition to come up?
Mr. Chairman, I have one just from a codes department standpoint. In discussing with water, had they approved building in the deck over that creek or stream? I know you're showing that on the plan.
To be honest with you, I'm not sure. I know that we did get approval of the setback, and we had engineers and surveyors do all the work to verify the topo map and the setback where the house is. As far as the deck going over it, I'd have to verify that and get back with you guys.
And it's something for the members here. It's really not. Don't really bring that in your thing, but for the permitting process, he'll have to go see stormwater for that. I just want to make sure that you're showing it on the drawing. I just want to be sure that that got covered in your portion up front coming up here.
Yes, sir. I have met with stormwater, and the structure is approved where it's currently at, meets the setback requirement from a stormwater side. The deck, it's going to be several feet above it, and it's just, I don't know that'd be an issue, but I'll verify that.
The yellow part that you proposed to add would be conforming, right?
Yes, sir. It would all be conforming except for that front right corner. You can't really see it on the screen, but there's a 40-foot setback line about 80% of the way back from the front of the structure. So that front right corner is the only thing that's non-conforming.
But wouldn't the left side over there that's only 3 feet from the property line, that's now non-conforming, correct?
Correct.
So you'd be increasing the non-conformity of that side if you make that 2-story?
Correct. And I think that wasn't an issue. As staying on the existing footprint, we can actually go 3 stories, and that wouldn't be a variance or an issue. It's when we extend the footprint out past the existing line that we get into the variance.
But is that increasing the degree of non-conformity?
No, sir. What we're saying is when we look at these, we're looking at what is the non-conformity, and it's its setback on the horizontal. There's not a vertical. That wall going up isn't violating code, so as a matter of code, we send it to you. As long as they follow that same wall up. If they were to cantilever it out closer to the thing, clearly they're increasing. But we would allow and issue a permit if he were insetting, like he's showing on that left side. He's insetting that, so he's not asking for anything there. The nonconformity he's talking about in the front right is the street setback's 40 feet required. And that's where it is actually conforming to the side yard setback over between he and the adjoining neighbor, but he is non-conforming out at the street level.
Okay, unless there are any further questions, we'll have up the opposition.
And as this couple comes up, can I say on the record, you have the nicest child. She visited our office yesterday and brought her kid with her. The most well-behaved young man I think I've ever had in my office. So I just want to compliment you on that. It has nothing to do with anything here. But.
Yeah, I didn't know this was going to be so long. He made it about an hour and a half.
Should I start? I'm Amy Gill, and we recently built the house to the west of the structure in question. And for clarification, there has never been a structure there. Nothing was demolished. It's the very first structure there. As a neighbor, I'm concerned about the proposal, as are the rest of the owner-occupant neighbors. Just to also clarify that Mr. Ellery Waters, who's to the east, owns his home and has lived there since it was built by his mother. Across the street, Martin and the next family, you have all their signatures on our petition. They all own their homes and love their homes. I'm sorry, I forgot. There are 3 houses across the street that signed the petition. So it is not a low rent street. We would take issue with that. The basis of our complaint is that the house is very close to the street. It's a very narrow street. It's not wide enough for sidewalks or curbs or even lines. It is a narrow street. And it's fine when it's a 768 square foot structure, but we're essentially talking about a new structure. The new structure is quadruple in size almost. So the massing of that structure that close to the street is going to have a significant impact on how small and narrow the street feels. I understand that we can't do anything about the fact that he's planning to build a duplex, and it's going to significantly impact the parking problems on the street. But it is a concern in having the structure so close. We're concerned that with investing all this money into the structure, we're delaying the time at which the street does come into more conformity. So if we invest all this money in this house, then it's going to be a long time before that house ever gets rebuilt farther back from the street. And if the street's widened, which is a very real possibility, the city does have already an easement on the other side of the street with sort of theoretical plans to widen it, it just gets even tighter. And Mr. Rodriguez did identify that the 40-foot setback puts him in the stream, which is why we built back where we did. And I don't quite understand why Mr. Rodriguez wouldn't want to just do that. I would also like to clarify that that is not a ditch, and it is not a wet weather creek. It is a spring. It is one of Laughlin's springs, hence the name of the neighborhood. And it is always wet. It doesn't matter how much drought there is. It is a steady stream of water. So we're very concerned that he plans to build on the edge of that. It is not a ditch. There are no banks to this. The water spreads out. When his foundation expert came to check on the foundation, the hole immediately filled with groundwater, and they were not considered enough to refill it. We filled it for the tenant in the house for him because it was becoming a mosquito trap. We're concerned about the deck over the water, and you saw I have a child who loves to play in the stream, becoming a habitat. But mostly we're concerned, and I realize that's not really the focus of this board, but mostly we're concerned about basically building a new house. I understand the 50% protection. In Mr. Rodriguez's conversations with my husband back in May, we understood that he was taking it down to the foundation, so it's a little bit different than what we had understood from Mr. Rodriguez, what he's talking about now. So essentially it's building a new house. Why not make it conform? This is the time to make it conform. Why are we going to all this effort when it's really not that difficult to build in a conforming way. There's plenty of space on the lot, so that's sort of the bulk of what I wanted to say.
I'm sorry, did you say you had a petition? Because I don't have it in my stuff.
And the other thing I wanted to ask was, you said you built differently, even with the spring, creek, whatever in the backyard. Where did you build and how did you get around these issues?
We built behind the spring. So we're the greenhouse, the two-story house, and we did some difficult things. It doesn't have to be this difficult to build on the lot. We insisted on having a slab monolithic foundation for energy efficiency. I'm sure anything that would be built by Mr. Rodriguez would be a conventional foundation anyway, so you wouldn't have to bring in all the dirt that we brought in. You could build with a conventional foundation quite easily behind the spring. There's plenty of room. We have a patio in front and steps and a bridge over the stream.
Is your house a single-family home?
It is.
How many other houses around there are single-family?
They're all single-family, with the exception of the two to our right, which are triplexes. We have heard that next to Martin there will be another duplex, which we're not happy about, but we can't do anything about it. So essentially there will be two duplexes directly across from each other, but the rest are all single-family and the triplexes.
Sir, would you like to speak?
Yes, my name is Martin Topping, and I live at 1510 Boscoville Street. I've been there almost 12 years. In that letter that I think I was sent, and I didn't bring it with me, but I remember that the stream was characterized as being a ditch, which implies a man-made structure, where this waterway, I've lived there 12 years, and a few years ago we had an extreme drought cycle that hit the Middle Tennessee region, and even during that time there was water in that stream. I don't know exactly, part of it goes through, it's channeled underground, I guess, or under pavement through part of the neighborhood, but behind that house and in front of Amy's home and behind Mr. Waters' home, and then the house adjacent to his, it's open and it runs as a stream, and various forms of wildlife go to that for their water. I'm concerned that if that structure is built and it's not taking that into consideration, it's going to not be a very sound structure to begin with, because I think that the water will have its way. I'm also concerned about having a very large structure right that close to the street, because it is a very tight street. We all park on the street. There's not a lot of good access for everyone as far as parking behind their houses. And I haven't, I'm really not convinced that the structure that has been mentioned is going to be a high quality structure if they're going to encompass the current structure, because it wasn't a high quality structure when it was built. So I don't really see how you can upgrade it in that manner. And I guess those are my concerns. I don't know if I've articulated them very well, but it doesn't sound like what is being presented is what will occur. I just don't really see how it could. So, thank you.
Any other questions for the opposition? Okay, then I think we'll let the applicant rebut.
In regards to a few of the points that were mentioned, the reason for the non-conforming, or the reason for not wanting to demolish the structure, and we would have to essentially set the house at the same setback as the neighbor to the left, which would put us, it basically would eliminate the backyard parking area. We would have to demolish the structure and put it, behind the stream or ditch. That's really not an option for what we're needing to do with the house. Being able to, the parking is an issue.
I'm sorry, tell me why that's not an option.
Because we essentially wouldn't have a backyard, we wouldn't have any parking. The alleyway is the access point and the parking to the garage. Essentially, by having the house at the very back of the property, there is no backyard. You lose all of that space on the lot, because the lot's only 150 foot deep, and that would put the house starting at probably 50 foot on the back side of that ditch or stream, and we would lose half the lot by doing so.
Does the house next door to the left have a garage?
Yes.
So it's possible to build a house that far back with a garage, you just lose a lot of your backyard.
Well, you don't have any backyard at that point. The other terminology as far as stream and ditch, the reason why it was referred to as a ditch on this document is because when I met with Stormwater and we pulled all the water maps, although water does run there most, if not all the time, it's not listed as a blue water stream. Even if it was, that doesn't affect our plans. Again, the quality construction, we have had engineers evaluate the foundation. We're in the business of building high-end homes, and we're not going to cut any corners as far as the integrity of the construction and the structure, especially not the foundation. So that's an issue that we've had professionals, licensed professionals, evaluate, and through the architectural process, we have an architect that designs all of our homes, and it will be a high-end product. The parking is right now the alleyway is pretty much the access point for most homes, or would be the access point for this home, and that's one of the main reasons for wanting to keep it on the front of the property. Another question was about the deck over the water and wildlife. We would obviously meet any requirements with making sure that stormwater is in the loop, and that during the construction process, the wildlife, if there was any, was taken care of, and that everything met. We're very into green buildings, so we're not going to create any problems on that front. I think those are the main questions.
I've got a question for you. We're in possession of 7 letters from your immediate neighbors all around you, all who said they're concerned about this. Why do you think nobody is in favor of you in the immediate area of this house?
Well, I would think because of the points that were brought up.
No, you haven't been able to convince anyone, it seems like, on your street that this is good for the street. I mean, you say it's going to be increasing property values. Probably didn't help to say that this was low rent for, for your neighbors. But, why?
Well, I clarify, if I can take those words back, it's not a low rent neighbor. Obviously, looking to, put a high-end structure, we wouldn't do that. So I misspoke and said that, and that was my fault. There are really nice homes on that street, and that's the reason why we're investing there.
Here, when we look at these cases, we also want to look at the impact on the neighboring properties. We have 7 all around you saying, we are having concerns about this. What do you say to us that says these 7 people, or, their concerns are misguided, or this is going to be not so bad for the neighborhood?
Well, my main point would be that there's no negative. The points that have been brought up, other than what could be aesthetics, which isn't going to be the case, there's no legitimate reason or concern that I see or understand how it affects the neighbors.
Well, the location of the house, the narrow street, that's what they're really saying, that this is just going to be disruption of all that.
Okay.
Can I ask a related question? And I think it's driving where David's driving as well. Have you met with the neighbors? You're not required to have a neighborhood meeting for what you're asking, but oftentimes it's a darn good idea because there's just miscommunication. Because like David, I find this incredibly compelling. You've got literally almost every house around you against you. And our legal standard is the appropriateness of the addition to the non-conforming structure. And so, just as evidence goes, there's a heck of a lot of people against you. So have you had a neighborhood meeting, or could you have a neighborhood meeting?
I could have a neighborhood meeting, and I haven't, and I would gladly entertain that. We want to make sure and make as many people happy as we can. We're not in the business to make enemies, and we want to increase our value and the community's value.
I think that's I'm sorry, David. But I think a possible result today is a deferral for you to have a neighborhood meeting, because lots of times when there's not enough information out there, kind of stuff fills the vacuum. And so anyway, that may be a good result. But anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm sorry. The one question I had was that, and it goes back to the case that we just heard, is an item D appeal. Is there a burden to show that the new nonconforming use is equal or less nonconforming?
Joey can answer that better than I am, but I asked
okay. Sorry, I'm actually working on that.
I'm sorry. Is there a burden to show that the new non-conforming structure has to be kind of less non-conforming? Is there an issue with adding that addition to the right front?
No. Well, no. In the instance of what I addressed with Mr. King was that, in our mind, it would be increasing the degree of nonconformity if it were coming closer to the road than what lays there today. So continuing the same line, in our mind, not increasing, but they got to come to you. And remember, too, it's the standard is it's not. We're not increasing. It can be the same, certainly, or less.
How you judged increasing it and its closeness to the road, not the plane on the road. Okay, that answers the question.
Yeah, because we look at sort of a two-step. What is the nonconformity? Well, it's the street setback. So how would I increase the degree of nonconformity? Well, I'd go closer to the road than existing. But if I continued or came even further back, I'm lessening.
You're the same. Okay.
Yeah, I'm aiming the same or decreasing.
But Joey, didn't you tell me our legal requirements are to gauge the appropriateness of the addition to the non-conforming? Okay.
Yeah, that's your power under D is that's your charge, and sort of balancing that other, is it increasing or decreasing? Sort of the weight you give to it.
Yeah, and I would encourage a meeting and a deferral, but I also would encourage some kind of creative architecture to move that thing past to the backside. I think it'll make you will probably hear that from your neighbors, so you don't need to hear it from me. But it seems like that there might be some creative ways to do it and conform to codes. But if you were to meet with the neighbors and come back with the similar type proposal, it sure would go a lot better for you here, potentially, depending upon what the outcome is.
So, we could proceed and take a vote, or you could voluntarily defer, or we could make a motion for you to defer for 30 days.
Yeah, I think if you want to defer, let us make the motion, because you've sat through a really long meeting, and if we defer it, then you go to be first to the next meeting, and
yes.
If not, if you defer it, you have to be last, and
yes, and
you don't deserve to be last again. So if you choose to defer it, just tell us you want us to defer it, and we'll make that motion.
And especially July 18th is a very large meeting. Since I'm not having a meeting because July 4th is the first Thursday, we have an extremely large regular docket on the 18th.
Oh, your choice.
Yeah, whichever is more time.
So you would like for us to defer?
Yeah,
I'll make a motion that we defer this to July 18th.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Any opposed? Passes.
Board of Zoning Appeals stands adjourned. This case will be heard first on July 18th hearing. 1 o'clock, you will not have to sit till 4. You're the first case. For the parties here and those parties not present, there's no new notice. So this is your notice for that hearing. So with that, the board is adjourned. Thank you.